Age of Sigmar story phase. Grab your hammers so we can clear a path through the chaos and forge our own narratives in the Age of Sigmar. Your allies across the 8 points this episode are...
Hi, I'm Paul. And guys, did you know that Archaon is an amazing football player?
I did know that.
I did not.
Like, he's fantastic. He never goes out of bounds. He always makes his catches. That's why he's called Archaon, the ever toes in.
And I'm Will. I've been listening to a lot of music lately. More importantly, the song Cursed Rain by the artist formerly known as the First Prince.
That's awesome. I, too, have been listening to a lot of music lately. And, you know, it's a lot of hip-hop, but mostly Raptorics.
And I'm Aaron, and I as well have been listening to a lot of music. And I'm not gonna sing it, but if you take a minute to listen to the lyrics, Britney Spears' "I'm a Slave for You" I think is obviously talking about the Dark Powers. And in this episode, we cover the lore of the Slaves to Darkness Battletome. Get ready to hear a whole lot of infighting, struggle for control, and asserted dominance. And then if we have time after all that, we'll talk about those STDs. How are you tonight, my Varanophiles? It's a word I just made up.
Yeah, that was a great word. I don't think
I love it.
I think it's existed, and you just plucked it out of the ether to exist.
Cultural
Page 47, right?
Yeah.
Give or take. So how are you guys doing?
Doing good.
Great, Aaron.
Doing awesome.
I'm doing fantastic.
Makes me think of like the Rockford Files, but for Age of Sigmar. But nobody's going to. We'll move.
That's fair.
Very cool. Off to a strong start today. Excellent. So here we are. We're here to talk about the Slaves to Darkness Battletome. I know this is one that people have been eager for a very long time, and here we are to talk about it. So this is our gift to you, the listeners. But before we talk about the Slaves to Darkness Battletome, instead, I'd be curious to know what you guys have been up to in the hobby, as I often ask. It's been a hot second. I feel like we got a revolving door of people coming through on the story phase. Haven't talked to you guys in a while. So in that case, I'm going to ask Will. Hey, Will, what you been up to in the hobby?
I have been working on my Slaves to Darkness.
Yeah.
We were grateful enough to get a review copy of the limited edition box from Games Workshop, and I've been assembling those very slowly since we got it. I've also, not to pick a side between Archaon and Be'lakor.
Someone's going to ask us to do that later, actually, so get ready.
Oh, perfect. Well, unrelated to that, I've been assembling a bunch of Chaos Legionnaires and painting everything in Be'lakor colors. But I haven't picked
This is the way.
No sides.
This is the way.
No sides.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Right down the middle.
Square, fair and impartial. Vin, hey, what have you been up to in the hobby?
Well, also working on some Slaves to Darkness today. And then I know, surprise, Dimek, I know. Ay, Dios mío. But I've also been doing a lot of work on my Zeech army, which was the last time I was on the show.
Yeah.
So I've been diligently plugging away on that. I'm working up a list for the host Duplicitous, and also a group for the Transient Forum. Because Carrick Acolytes are super cool, and they're super fun models to build and paint. Recently I did an inventory. Dun, dun, dun.
I love inventories.
It was good. I ended up finding out how many of things I had, and I have a lot of Carrick Acolytes. I thought I was like, I might have 60 or 80, and I ended up with almost double those. So, oh yeah. It is a mighty need. And to look at the list, the other thing I've realized was that I helped with the Dogs of Warcry event last year.
Who?
One of our missions at Adepticon. Dogs of Warcry, really cool podcast. Check it out sometime. But I helped out with that event at Adepticon last year, and I built a whole ton of Raptorics. It was somewhere like 40 or 60 or some crazy divisible by 6 number, and painted them all up. And with this book coming out, the Slaves to Darkness book, I was like, wow, I wonder if these guys are good. And they're not bad. So I'm very excited to have a bunch of hobby done for a bunch of Angry Birds. So
nice.
It should be a lot of fun. Yeah, very, very excited to throw a bunch of Angry Birds at somebody.
Just throw them at buildings or something.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
My Kyric Acolyte story is I built my Kyric Acolytes years ago, probably at this point, right when they came out. And I know to this day that one of my dudes, his shield is upside down, but I glued him with plastic glue. And I said to myself, Aaron, let it go. You're going to forget all about this, and it's not going to matter. So don't do anything about it. This was years ago. I have not forgotten all about it. They're right over there, and I know that shield is upside down, and it's driving me crazy. I can't sleep at night. So that's my Kyric acolyte this story.
It's the closest thing you'll ever have to a conversion.
Yeah.
Cold, Will, cold.
Small little.
That made it even worse.
My bit of chaos in
Only
this
converted model
orderly world.
At your house.
God, I can picture it. It's upside down right now, and it's driving me. Anyways. Hey, Paul, what have you been up to in the hobby?
I'm working on some Slaves to Darkness. I am working on Archaon, actually. I've been meaning to paint him for freaking ever, and so I'm just starting to work through him. So,
right on. Very cool. And what have I been up to in the hobby, guys? Guess what? Surprise, surprise. I'm assembling some Slaves to Darkness.
What?
I've got the chosen.
No way!
Put together right here. I got almost all of them done at this point. So I think the last episode, I mentioned that I was working on some slaves, knowing that this book was coming out, just with little fiddly bits that I had hanging around, and I figured I'd just ride that momentum. I also ordered, I just telling Vint this, I ordered an Ogroid Myrmidon, knowing that the book was coming out, but they're really hard to find for a while. I think they just maybe we're going to transition maybe some of the boxes, or I don't know what it was. And so I was afraid that they weren't going to make them anymore because I'm dumb. I'm a dumb person. And I ordered one from Australia, and I'm sure I paid out the nose when I literally just saw that they are you could just order them normally all of a sudden. Again, in fact, I was at a game store in Minneapolis over Thanksgiving, and they had just a pile of them sitting there. And yet mine is still crossing an ocean right now because I just have no impulse control. So that's where I'm at, Slaves to Darkness wise.
did you go to the source?
Go to the source.
In Minneapolis, the game store, was it called the Source?
No, I went to Tower something, Dice Tower something. What's it called up there? Are they the ones that do the comic too? Does it come out of there? Interesting. I didn't know. I just picked the nearest one to my sister-in-law's house because I was trying to get the baby to go to sleep, and so I was just driving around and I went to the nearest game store and I stumbled upon that one.
I'm nice. Sorry I spent $75, sweetie. I was trying to get the baby to go to sleep.
Well, I think they had a little bit of a sale or something like that. But no, you're right. It was just an attempt to go buy little dudes. I actually bought fell bats instead. Those are also, you can't buy on the web store anymore. Anyways, neither here nor there. Let's get into this story. Yeah. Any other things that you guys have been working on that you want to chat about? I'm not hearing anything. So we will get to the story phase. But first, one more thing. Stick with me, listeners. Let me plug some stuff. Let me plug The Mortal Realms, literally the show that you're listening to right now. Once we get through that, we'll get to that story phase. So here it comes. You can find more episodes of this podcast and all of our other shows at www.themortalrealms.com. Don't forget the. It's important. You can email us your feedback at our email address, which is mortalrealms@gmail.com. No the. Don't bring it up. Forget all about it. You can find our Patreon at patreon.com/themortalrealms to support the show. You can get early releases of this show, The Story Phase, as well as semi-exclusive content like the Pocket Realms, which are short story phases hosted by Davy and myself. Here's this little behind the curtain. Davey was going to be on this episode, but he said, no, you know what? Forget it. I'm not interested. Vince's going to be on. I don't want to be on it.
I told you didn't want to be on because I was here.
Scared of right away. I didn't want to tell you. But I was forced to tell you the truth. And then if you can or don't want to pitch in monetarily for the show, that's okay. You can head on over to your podcast service of choice and you can give us a review, whether via stars or thumbs ups, or you could write a little blurb about how much you like or dislike the show. That's all cool. Or you can go ahead and tell a friend about The Mortal Realms. So all that to be said, thanks everybody for listening. Will had mentioned it earlier, but then I'll also bring up right now that GW did send us a Slaves to Darkness, what do they call it? Army box, whatever the term is for what this thing is, which included the book that we're talking about today. So we want to say thanks for that. Normally I forget and I bring it up at the end, but I'm going to bring it up at the top today. Cool. Here we go. Let's do the story phase. Paul, if you would be so kind as to take us there.
The story phase. In the story phase, we delve into the stories, characters, creatures, and environments of the 9 realms.
And to that, I'll say Eric who? I don't remember.
I like how
Same
you've
as
been
it-
playing us off of each other. Like we've been on opposite. You keep wanting him.
That's how
and I love it. Keep doing it. It's perfect.
Keep the proletariat down. That's how we do it up here. Yeah,
I'm the proletariat. Is that me?
in our ivory towers? Man, I can't talk today.
Keep the cultists down in this Varenspire tower.
Yeah, you got it.
See, it would be easier to put you on the same episode schedule-wise, but Aaron just loves chaos.
Yeah, me and Britney Spears. Okay, so
You got a callback. We're only like 10 minutes in.
Slaves, those are the best kind. Slaves to Darkness Battletome. This has been a long time coming. I feel like there's such a presence in the mortal realms. Why is it taking us so long to talk about them? But you know what? The past is past. The future's now. We're here to chat about them today. So let's catch folks up if they don't know who these Slaves to Darkness are. And to do so, I might dive into my favorite segment of the entire show. We might just start there as we always do. And I'm going to ask you, fine fellas, if you could do me the honor of coming up with a single one-sentence description of who the Slaves to Darkness are to really prime the pump, prime the conversation so that listeners can get a sneak peek as to who these folks are. So, Paul, I often start with you, and so I will continue to do so because I am nothing if not consistent. So please give us your one-sentence summary of the Slaves to Darkness.
They are hell-bent, demon-bound, God-touched warriors devoted to the 4 primordial gods known as the gods of chaos. Except for the Horned Rat. He's just kind of a jerk, so they don't talk about him, and he's not in this book.
I'll fight you.
Is he in this book? Come on, not a single rat, not one.
If being a jerk is what leads you from being, I mean, they're all jerks. Like being a jerk means nothing.
Yeah, right. It's such a low
Jerk
bar.
Everybody else, come on.
I guess turtles kind of is cool. Will, clockwise, you're next on my screen. Give me one sentence summary, please.
The Eightfold Path is always dividing them. But now we're going to talk about those who remain undivided.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. No. Bent, show these two how it's done.
Followers of the true gods, absorbing and enlightening the masses to the true path to both glory and excelling at what they do.
Excellent. Okay.
I love it.
I like the Path to Glory introduction. I feel like that's a core component. It's necessary. I feel like we dabbled and we touched on a bunch of different things.
Yeah, there is something now that when we're recording, we can see each other.
Mm-hmm.
The listener loses the experience of seeing the gears turn in people's faces as they try to go to the spot. Like staring off into the middle distance.
Like the far off looks are important.
You would think at some point we'd be like, hey, this is the thing we have to do every single time. But no.
Nope.
No.
I started thinking of mine as Paul was doing his.
Yeah.
I'm going to be honest. I almost skipped it entirely because I jumped right to the origin thing and I missed my line. I need to read my notes better. And it's my favorite segment. How could I forget? Thanks, guys. That really brightened my day. I was I was just down in the dumps, but that really picked up my spirits. Okay, so Slaves to Darkness. I think we've scratched the surface. We've touched a little bit on some highlights or some standout components to who they are. But let's rewind time a little bit. Let's cast our eyes backwards. I keep using that phrase every episode, and it means nothing. That's not a real phrase, Aaron. But
it is now. You've said it every episode. It's part of the consciousness, and it's just part of who you are.
Yeah. Let's start at the beginning, which is, as everybody knows, Paul especially knows that it's a very good place to start.
You owe me $1.
And
like a whole bunch of dollars for the last episode and 3 episodes ago.
Well, that's why I didn't sing the Britney Spears thing. Let's come to the origins of this faction or race or whoever. It's not really a race. Where did they come from? When did they get their start? Does anybody have any thoughts?
Where did they come from? Cotton Eye Joe.
Yeah, that's exactly.
I thought it too, Paul, when I saw it on our list. I was like, where did they come from? Nurgle Eye Joe.
No, that's the worst eye to have. I'd rather say. So anybody have any thoughts on the origin? Did the book touch on this at all?
It touched on it a bit. The interesting issue with Slaves to Darkness is their origin is like the origin of the people is kind of the same as the origin of like what would be cities of Sigmar. Age of Myth, they were all mortals, but there is a key turning point where some of the population got to go to Azir and live happy and be cool, and everyone else had to kind of make the choice of joining Chaos or dying. And that's kind of like the first followers of the Ruinous Powers were those who would rather not die.
Rather not die. So selfish. I mean, although that's true, especially sort of demarcating the difference between the goods and the bads, and you can use your own definition as who's good or bad in that story. But even before that, like, I mean, they kind of had some seeds in the Age of Myth, right? And that they were talking about how in the early days of Sigmar running around and sort of creating society, it's almost in the act of creating society, he introduced some, I don't know, not shortcomings, what's the word? Like flaws in people. Yeah. And like those flaws were the fertile ground from which the seeds of chaos grew, right? And so maybe not right then and there is where the Slaves to Darkness arose. It introduced, I don't know, I guess you could even say an evil into the world, right? Like civilization fostered a certain element of not goodness, and it was from that a lot of the chaos got its start, though not necessarily intrinsically Slaves to Darkness per se, but more of a broader, vaguer version of chaos, which I thought was interesting. That they even talked about it in this book at all. I thought was cool. Paul and Vint, what do you guys think?
Well, I think you both gave great answers. There also is another two answers, I think, and that's Be'lakor and Archaon. Which I want to talk about a lot when we get into the meat of this episode, where their stories started in the old world and have continued not only in the old world and in the mortal realms, but apparently other places as well. So I
saw that.
Yeah.
I don't know the right time to talk about it, but it was noteworthy, listeners, and maybe we can dive into it deeper. But it just as at a glance, it seems like he was conquering worlds between the old world and the mortal realms. And so, like, man, I'd be very curious to see what that was. Anyways.
It's cool. It was a long thing where they're talking about how the gods of chaos themselves were even before the old world, etc. So this is one of those things. If you know your Warhammer lore and you know your Warhammer 40k lore, like this is one of those things that gets real timey-wimey. The connections become real wibbly-wobbly.
Vince, do you have any origin thoughts, things that jumped out at you in terms of the early days of Chaos or Slaves to Darkness?
I mean, you guys really kind of nailed it on the head. I think the big treat for me in this book is how they like use the verbiage and the talk of what the Slaves to Darkness are. It's very much the words they use aren't, oh, and this evil empire rose from the thing. It's the defenders of this people or the armies of these folks who have been aggressed by Gorka Morka, or, and they just kind of write it in almost anti-hero-esque, but then also don't shy away from the violence that it brings, right? Like, cool, you stayed around and worshipped the gods of order after Sigmar fled, and then you got torched and murdered for staying and doing that. Or you could have just given in and followed Zeech or followed Nurgle or followed one of the primordial powers. And I thought that was cool because they refer to like not only the chaos gods, but the primordial powers, which in other books you'll see will be like Morgor or some of the other gods that are like beasts of chaos gods, or I'm going to murder his name, but the ancient dragon ogre that Archaon steals the sword from. It's Crackerjack, the great god Crackerjack. Yes,
Got one, yeah.
Yep. I think it's like Karuadrak. I don't know, something like that. Yeah, there it is, Crackerjack.
Somewhere in there, the right answer.
Will's crying. It's okay.
No, it's perfect.
It's okay, buddy.
It's just finally good to see someone set the story straight. We've heard Sigmar's version of events, but these are the people that are boots on the ground, kind of living in it.
Well, and absolutely.
Well, I was gonna say, but before we get to the great, I guess depending on whose perspective it is, the great portrayal of Sigmar, while we're hanging out in maybe the Age of Myth, were there any stories from this era that folks wanted to talk about before we actually get to like the chunk of the timeline, which is really Age of Chaos? Any Age of Myth stuff you guys want to talk about?
Yeah, so mine kind of touched on when we were talking about the origins of the faction, but there's the story, the seeds are planted. And sort of like you were saying, Aaron, it really highlights that chaos didn't just spring from nothing, and it didn't even spring from like the ruinous powers making themselves manifest. Chaos first took hold because of the actions of Sigmar, because he tried elevating everyone and like enhancing things. Some of the things he enhanced were people's worst instincts, kind of giving power to those who would manipulate it. And in that manipulation created a lot of the first footholds of chaos, which I thought was interesting.
It's very much like a human nature, and oftentimes it is humans, right? Like they talk about how a lot of chaos comes from the human side of things, but human nature, like almost the idea of like an original sin type thing that's baked into these people that like was brought out because what Sigmar did. Caused his own problems. Any other stories or anything else to add, my friends?
I liked the gazing from beyond. This is kind of ties into what we had said earlier of how the chaos gods are kind of just there and waiting for things to happen. But I like this specifically the sentence, with whispers and dreams they foster and inflame the darkest desires of men, Dwarden, and elves. I like that they have spread it out more and like made it very clear that in miniature form as well as in lore form, that we're corrupting not just humans here, we're corrupting all mortals. And that's fun. It also theoretically hints towards Chaos Dwarden at some point. It may hint towards Chaos Elves at some point, which is something we haven't seen, which would be kind of a cool twist, maybe. So it's fun. I liked it.
Some of the Warcry warbands have an or two in them, right?
The Splintered Fang had an elf, and then Spire Tyrants and Iron Golems had a Dwarden. Yeah, because it said elves and not singular elf. So we're good. There's more.
must be more out there. I don't feel like I've ever talked about this before, and this is not really the subject of this book, but I like that like they're starting to like combine like those three races as being sort of like the core like mortal contingent of the world, right? There's countless other races, maybe untold other races, but those are like the three that like contribute or consist of like the core like regular people, which is to say that's what essentially the Cities of Sigmar is. But I don't know, for whatever reason, I like it just being that trifecta a little bit. I thought that was like a classic fantasy trope kind of.
Well, I think my favorite thing about this battle tome is that, like the Corvus Cabal, it's like the Great Gatherer, where it brought so many different plot points and so many different themes together in this battle tome. I loved picking out all these different details. And usually when you're reading a battle tome, it's like 7 or 8, maybe, 10 or 12 if it's really into it. But like there's so many threads, so many plots that are picked up, started, continued in this book. That was super fun for me and engaging to read. So I liked it quite a bit.
Okay, cool. So Age of Myth, everybody's having a good time. It was fun. It was always sunny, et cetera, et cetera. But let's get to the real meat of this book, the real chunky component, which is to say the Age of Chaos. Makes sense.
I think there's a very big point, which is that there is only 2 stories in the Age of Myth here, as opposed to almost every other battle tome that I can recall. The Age of Myth is not the center point. The Age of Myth is not the high point of the civilization. It's the Age of Chaos, which seems self-explanatory, but at the same time, it's really nice to actually see that represented in the stories that they tell. I thought that was a really cool nod.
Also, on top of that, I feel like the Age of Chaos in this book starts earlier than it does in some of the other ones. Because for most of the other ones, they take the Battle of the Burning Skies as like the second entry point. And here it barely makes it to the first set of pages. Because to Chaos, their mere existence is the Age of Chaos, which is why it's the highlight.
Yeah. I like across all the different battle tomes, like the distribution of stories for each of the ages really tells a lot about the army itself. Like knowing how much time is spent in any given age really says a lot about like the army that you're talking about. And so as we've said multiple times now, the Age of Chaos being the large share, the lion's share of the stories in this really goes to show like how formative this age was for the Slaves to Darkness, which was pretty cool. So then to that, I'll ask, what did the Age of Chaos look like for Slaves to Darkness before we get to any of the stories? Just generally, how was it different, or how was it similar to some of the other Chaos factions that we've read about thus far? Anybody got any thoughts about that?
I would say it's extremely similar, specifically to Stormcast in the Age of Sigmar, because the Age of Chaos is all about the invasion, conquering the realms, taking over civilizations, reconsecrating the ground into what it ought to be, but before the Stormcast.
It's like almost like the Stormcast were taking notes on what the Chaos was doing in Age of Chaos. Like, oh, that really worked. Okay, we'll try. But we'll add lightning to it. That's the problem. They didn't have enough lightning.
Always the problem. Not enough lightning.
Well, and I think that actually is like almost verbatim earlier in the book, Paul. They talk about how like Sigmar leaves to go figure out, how am I going to beat these Chaos Warriors, because I just can't do it. I just can't. And I thought that was really well put too. Again, it came from that perspective of why, why did you leave? Like, what did you do? In a real empty throne, right? A real empty gate. And they talk about how could a father abandon his family in such a way? And I was like, oh, so good.
Oh, it's so good.
It's so good. And then he literally did. He went and took notes. How did they do this? How are we going to try and strike back? And it wasn't until the advent of the Stormcast where it felt like he even had a chance. So I don't know, it's good. It's been a really solid. Anyway, continue. Yeah. My bad.
Did you guys have any stories that jumped out at you from this age that you want to chat about?
Yeah, I had one pretty early on that was Claim of the Everchosen. This story stood out to me mostly because it just takes everything Archaon was doing in the Age of Chaos and just kind of clumps it together. So we see here he gets he fights the 3 greater demons that get added onto Dorgar. It even says he spurns the favor of the Great Horned Rat, which means the Great Horned Rat came up to him at one point and was like, I have gifts. You want gift? And he slapped it out of his hand and kept walking. Could not care less. And just goes to show how he came from nothing to become the force that would conquer all the mortal realms as time goes on.
I don't want to spend too much time on this, but can anyone tell me how many of his gifts that he currently has did he also have in the old world? Is this a reinvention? Okay, so the idea that he went to go gather them here is kind of a misnomer, because to some degree he should have already had them when he rolled up.
Yeah, he had them in the old world. He went on a quest after he forsake Sigmar. As his devoted, he went and conquested out for each one of these 6, I believe it is. The Armor of Morkar, the Eye of Shirian, Uzul, the Slayer of Kings, Dorgar, the Mount, the Crown of Domination, and the Arm. Did I say the Armor of Morkar already?
Yes.
You did.
So it might be 5.
And then the Slayer of Kings, the sword.
Uzul, I said that one.
From Cracker Jack.
Kraken Rack.
So I guess maybe I might have misspoke in that it seemed as if he was gathering them in this book, but maybe they wrote it in such a way to make it sound like he gathered them previously and he just rolled up with them.
Yeah. Were the Gaunt Summoners around in the old world, or
that would have been a new thing? Yeah,
because it didn't say that he was gathering the artifacts, but that he was gathering the Gaunt Summoners, that he was making Dorgar. Because I think Dorgar was just a cool horse before, right?
But he was basically, he was a horse and then he became a shapeshifter.
Yeah, and so it's how he got the shape that he has and sort of solidifying a bit more of where he was from.
Exactly.
Yeah, very cool. Other stories you guys want to talk about?
I thought it was kind of cool. You've got the Red Century, and that I thought was neat because it harkened back to the Red Feast. Mm-hmm. And made me really wonder about how old Korgus Kul really is, because in that book, in that novel, he goes to take down the Algaraxi Magocracy, right? They're oppressing his people. My people, they are oppressed. So he goes, and Korn is like, cool, I'll give you the cheat codes if you go beat up my brother's lackeys. And so then Korgu's cool, picks up some of his homies, and they hypothetically go do it, but there's no sequel to the Red Feast. However, here we have in the book that says it is besieged by Kornate and then Zechian forces, but they wipe out that great steel spire. And I thought that was kind of cool. If I was curious if Korgu's cool won that fight, given he's in a bunch of other books after that, but it's just kind of cool to see that they wipe out that magocracy.
And then he goes to the moon.
Yeah, he goes to the moon.
Paul, I know you wanted to talk about this one too. Were there more you wanted to add to that?
So one of the things that was really specific about this book is that the Red Sentry in particular harkens to the Agloraxy, as you were talking about. It talks about the steel spike, talks about the Great Parch, and there was actually like 3 or 4 pages earlier that went on at exactly the same topic and all these different things. It talked about one of Archaon's generals now leading part of the Great Parch. It talked about all of these different areas. And all of that lore is specifically, I don't know if it's original from Soulbound campaign book, but is absolutely spelled out in excellent detail in that core book for the Soulbound game. And then it continues on in the Brightspear. It was specifically limited in Brightspear. So they took a lot of the background that was in Soulbound and have it expanded upon here. And that was something that I really enjoyed because there are now lore nuggets from Soulbound that apply to characters that are in this Battletome now. So one of the questions that we got that's much later on from a listener was they're talking about there's a second in command to Archaon. Who is Archaon's best friend? Chrisling asked this question. And in the Soulbound core book and in the Brightspear City Guide, I'm not sure which, it talks about how the Demon Prince in the Great Parch considers himself the second in command to Archaon, and he has been tasked with taking over this area of the Great Parch. So it's cool to have so many different sources now that we can get lore for Age of Sigmar, and it increases and expands upon it. So I like that quite a bit.
Right on. I'll keep asking. You guys have more stories from the Age of Chaos that you want to chat about?
I also enjoyed the Battle of the Burning Skies just because it brought up an interesting question, which is Sigmar lost his hammer, but then it says he kept fighting. So my question is, what weapon did he fight with? And that would be an awesome hook, an awesome story to be like, okay, this is the hammer that Sigmar used when he lost Galmaraz. Or this is the sword that was used at the Battle of Burning Skies. Like I could see a whole army, a whole background just from that one little piece that says, but he continued to fight and did a tactical withdrawal. So I want to know what weapon he used. What do you guys think?
As I say, since you said it'd be a great hook, I think a great right hook is exactly what he was using.
Guys, I think the game for this episode needs to be, what does Sigmar name his fists? Law and Order, for example. But I mean, that's not there's better
lightning
ones for
and
Sigmar.
thunder.
Little thunder, little lightning, yeah.
Listeners, I mean, there may be more examples over the course of the night while the rest of us think about some good fist names. But I would love if you also provided us some fist names in our Discord at www.themorrealms.com/Discord. We'll be talking about that later for sure.
I mean, my two are going to be shock and awe.
Aw, yeah. Bravo. So I'll add, while we're doing that, does anybody, there's a lot of stories here, so I'm going to keep asking if anybody else has any others that they want to bring up at all.
I mean, it talks about Varanthex's maw already being industrialized, which I thought was cool.
Yeah.
Because it shows that the armies and groups of Warcry have been around since the Age of Chaos, as opposed to them being a recent thing. So I thought that was neat, just a little tidbit to be like, oh, by the way. And then, of course, it talks about the stolen hammer, where Ephrax is like, yoink, this is mine.
That's a nice hammer. Would be a shame if somebody built a fortress around it so I could build a battery.
I really like the through line of all of this, like the series of stories in the Age of Chaos, because I think oftentimes you get it, like we've talked about, you get it from the Stormcast perspective, or like the Forces of Order perspective, right? And that kind of divides up a little bit of the, like it compartmentalizes like different realms and how they're, affected by it. But here was like a one after the other. Here's what Chaos did then. Like here was the first step of what Chaos did, and this is the realm they went to next, and this is Nurgle going to the realm of life, and Khorne going to the realm of fire, and et cetera, et cetera. And it really just goes one after, and like each of the major battles. Here's the battle of what is it? Black skies and then burning skies. Like there's too many sky battles. That's enough. But like this is how Nagash was taken out. This was here's the fight that took Sigmar off the scene. And so it was nice to just get them rattled off one after the other. Like in my head, I sort of know them, but like I lose track of which comes first and what order they come in. And so this was nice. This is the timeline I might want to reference again in the future, knowing like here's what happens beat by beat.
What I was just going to say about your point, Aaron, about like this being the timeline to point to. It's because like when the actual setting, the Age of Sigmar, started, it was a lived-in world that was kind of to the point of collapse. Chaos had won. And this is the book where we get to see that all happen. It is setting the table for every single realm for when we finally pick up the story in the Age of Sigmar, for when we actually entered the fold with that very first box set. So there's a lot of ground to cover. Yeah,
and because they're undivided, it is almost like the story of Chaos as a whole, as opposed to like individual pieces of Chaos, right? I'm sure the Nurgle book talks about like the attack on the realm of life, but it probably doesn't have much to say about what happened in Akshi. And you can do that for all the different gods. So this is sort of Chaos writ large, which is neat. I'm going to ask a listener question. Patron of the show, Dog Tired, has a question, but before I get to their question, I'm going to say, hey guys, if you want to get a question on the Mortal Realms podcast, here's what you got to do. Remember that Discord I mentioned before? Of course you do. It was just a couple minutes ago, but in case you forgot, it's www.themortalrealms.com/Discord. You hang out there. As I've said before, and I will say again, every day, all day. You should be there right now, quite frankly. If you're not, I'll give you a second to go log in. Okay, you're there. One day, like a thief in the night, I'm going to roll up and I'm going to say, hey, we're going to record an episode about whatever I feel like recording an episode about. Do you have any questions? And you're going to say, yes, of course I have questions. I'm full of questions, head to toe. I'm just chock full. They're coming out of my ears. And so you're going to ask them on the Discord. I'm going to write them down. I'm going to put them into our show notes, and I'm going to read them like Dog Tired's question right here. Patron of the show. Thank you very much. They ask, what do you think are the overall implications of GW outright saying the Age of Chaos is 500 years? Is it possible that this is the beginnings of a more complete timeline? Will, you had brought this up earlier, actually, this 500 years spiel in the Age of Chaos. I feel like a lot of times in terms of these eras, we get a vague stretch of time, not knowing specifically how long they are, but the book here references 500 years. What was your take on that?
I like it. There may be references to like timelines of what happens with the rest of the Age of Sigmar itself that gets a little bit more wonkier. But as far as the Age of Chaos goes, 500 years is a great time to show Chaos taking over, conquering the realms. And then one of the stories here is Khorne gets bored. 500 years is too much time to not have any true foes. So I think it walks that like perfect line of enough time for things to happen, but not being like millennia long of just absolutely just the same thing over and over again.
500 years can give you such a crick in the neck. But I also like it's 500 years because it's a understandable amount of time, right? Like, it allows for somebody to have been mortal, devote themselves to the chaos gods, and like they've lived a long life if they devoted themselves immediately but survived, right? It allows for an understandable amount of time for people to be whittled down, but some are still alive. I think that's one of the things that I always had a harder time with is if the Age of Chaos is so long, how could anybody have survived living out in the realms without any protection after Sigmar went into Azir? If it's, 1,000 years or 1,500 years, it just seems like ridiculous. But like 500 years sounds like a long time, but it doesn't sound like forever. And I think that was one of the things in the early lore for the Age of Sigmar where it was hard to understand. You were like, these people are fleeing and they're always running, and these are the only people that survived, right? But now, in the same place where we started off, right, in the Great Parch, where Korgus Cole was going and the Stormcast first came down, right, where we had that story of the tribe just running from nowhere to just try and avoid death, we have, oh yes, the Agloraxi were here, and they were able to hold out because, right, oh no, the Iridians were here, and they actually have a city that survived the entire time, right? We're getting the pieces that make the Reclaimed more believable, and they make the Reclaimed more victorious, and like you can understand more the pride they would have that, like, no, we lasted through this, right? We have these places of safety that allowed civilization to survive and allowed people to survive, and I appreciate that a lot because it gives you a frame of reference that makes it believable.
God, I love cities that survived the Age of Chaos. Bad props. I like that Age of Chaos had a definitive beginning and a definitive end, like in that, like it's between two ages, so it makes all the more sense then that we would know how long it was, because like there are clear. I mean, maybe up for debate when the Age of Chaos started per se, but I bet you if you lived in the realms, you weren't alive back then, but like you would have a pretty clear idea when Age of Chaos hit, and like when the Stormcast roll up is when the Age of Sigmar starts, right? So because of that, like it shouldn't necessarily be all that up to interpretation. It seems like you should have clear guidelines, and so the fact that it landed up to 500 years seems like a good chunk of time as any.
Yeah,
it checks out.
Yeah. I will say, I heard a couple people mention that this is like the first time that 500 years has ever been brought up. Maybe that's true that it's explicitly 500 years, but I think they've alluded to a similar amount of time previously. And the reason I bring that up is because we've had this exact conversation about a year ago. I found the receipts in the Discord talking about how long it was. So somewhere else, I think it might have been brought up, maybe in one of the campaign books or something. So they've been hinting at this time or this stretch of time for a bit.
They say something earlier on in one of the other books that it was the half a century of the Age of Chaos, and it's something like that in one of the other books.
Yeah.
I think I read somewhere else that someone might have thrown out like 400 years, which is you can just round up, I guess. So.
Or just an unreliable narrator.
Right.
What?
Well, speaking of unreliable narrator, the reason Aaron has receipts is because I asked the question in our chat, and then he looked it up, and then I was the one who a year ago answered the question for someone else. So it comes up so few and far between. Even people who knew at one point forgot.
Yeah. And actually, you were talking to Darth Alec back then, and I think you were talking to him again this time.
Right.
So. Time is
So not only did the Reclaimed exist in Age of Sigmar, but we reclaim knowledge in our own Discord. Present.
That's one of my favorite Aaron moments. All right. Cool. So I mentioned Stormcast, Lightning Bolts, Age of Sigmar starts. We're here. We made it, guys. That was a quick 500 years. I'll ask, what did the Age of Sigmar mean for the Slaves to Darkness or Chaos as a whole? What does this era bring for this faction? How do things change for them? How do they stay the same? What's it mean for the Slaves to Darkness? What do you guys think?
I like the story of at the Starless Gates. It talks about how a resurrecting Nagash returns to annihilate a Chaos horde, and then he begins his campaign to retake Shyish entirely. So the interesting thing to me is that he came from somewhere else into the realm, which is antithetical towards the god of death being outside of the realm of death to resuscitate, but that's because the Nagashazar was taken. But it also implies that during the Battle of Burning Skies that he was not corporeal. He was almost in spirit form, because they talked about when Nagashazar was taken, and I think it was slightly before in the book itself. So he was defeated, and like his Mortarks had to like scurry his body away to like Styx because he had to go to like a pocket realm. Yeah, and so that's in this timeline for the Age of Chaos before the Battle of Burning Skies. So if that's true, then that adds a completely different dimension to Nagash's presence and Nagash's commitment to the Battle of Burning Skies.
You can't hold. I mean, you can hold his absence against him when he was fine and didn't show up, like in his earlier battles. I mean, he was literally like incapacitated for this. I can't hold that against him for not showing up to Burning Skies because he's barely sentient at that point.
Well, it reminds me of the book that we read, Nagash, the Undying King, which is a great book, and like so, it reminds me more of that, is where the Mortarks are kind of in charge. So all I'm saying is that the Battle of Burning Skies has now become a really interesting point in fiction for the lore of the Mortal Realms, because we have so many different ideas thrown around, and it's such a pivotal time. I feel like it's something that, maybe at some point we'll get a historical book of being like, this was what the Battle of Burning Skies was. These are the forces that were in charge or were part of the combat and stuff like that. I think it'd be really fun to have something like that.
I mean, there's so many historical points that I want to read about that we'll just have to wait patiently for.
With some of those, like, was that in any of those early campaign books from the original Age of Sigmar, Paul? I haven't been able to go through those in ages, but they were like the All Gates and like the Quest for Galmaraz, like those books.
Yep. But those are all things that happened after the Stormcast came back to the realms. So this would actually be in the Age of Chaos. And I don't know that we have anything that was in the Age of Chaos, but like that would be a cool place to visit, right?
Yeah. We barely even have any Black Library stuff from back then. I mean, Undying King is from back then, but very few other things are. A book I'll recommend later, or a novella I'll recommend later was as well. Other early Age of Sigmar stories or thoughts you want to talk about?
Yeah, since Vint had sort of mentioned the All Gates, it was so cool to see this happen live, and just like looking back on it is just super fun, which is the war at the All Gates, which is the Realm Gate Wars have been progressing. Sigmar and his allies have been moving across the realms, and there is a final battle for the All Gates, a final battle for control of this super special thing to overthrow Archaon, to defeat evil, and the good guys just get whomped. They just get smacked away. They have like some wins here or there. They shut down a few gates. Destruction does its job. But Archaon wins this fight, which is just super cool to like, you see all of this build up for the good guys. People were saying Age of Sigmar is too noble bright, and then Chaos pulls out the win, which I loved seeing this happen as it was kind of happening.
Now I see what side you're on, I guess. I mean, I'm crestfallen over here. I got my hopes dashed, and you're like, go Chaos.
Yeah, Sigmar is my first army, but I'm really liking this new book a lot.
Sure. All right, that makes sense. Other stories or thoughts about this early, I guess, Realm Gate wars?
I mean, you also have at the end of that, though, it talks about how Fangathrak, it gets released by the Ironjaws, and it's kind of neat to see as you read through that like Ironjaws and Greenskins are kind of the bad guys for Chaos too. They're not like these like, just plebeians that are here to muck it all up, or the plot device that got in the way. They're like a real threat to both Chaos and Order. And I thought that was kind of neat to see Chaos be like, no, they're the bad guys too, though.
Like, I'm bad, I know, but like they're worse. Like, have you guys seen what these guys are doing over here?
They ate your whole village. We took like half. Come on now. Like, you could even sign up with us. Go try and sign up with an orc. Try it.
Yeah.
But I thought that was kind of cool because it like, again, this book is so well written. It feels like they're like, but those dastardly orcs and Gur, they screwed up my plans again. Oh.
Well, if we're talking about bad guys and foiled plans, you might throw a third hat into that ring, and that Nagash is going to he's back in the land of the living, or undead, I guess. And he's yet another, not I guess a tertiary bad guy to both Chaos and Destruction and Order. And we all know the story we've covered a couple times now, but his we're going to go into the AOS 2.0 time frame. His time tribulations, the Necroquake, he does his business, and you guys maybe will recall that when his plan was about to come to fruition, it was an organization of all the other Grand Alliances arrayed against him. Maybe not an alliance per se across, but they're all rolled up to stop him. And that's, I think, where we got introduced to, I can't remember her name, but the Dark Oath War Queen was reading it.
Marakar Bloodsky.
Yep. Yeah, there you go. And so she was, I don't know, at least a named character. I don't know if she's pivotal or not. A named character leading a large contingent of chaos to help try and stop Nagash. Of course, they themselves weren't successful, but rather the Skaven were in bringing that, maybe not crashing halt, but like disrupting it enough that we got, the AOS 2.0 time frame that we know and love. That was the only, and I just added way more to that story than what was in this book. They don't spend a lot of time talking about that Soul Wars era. I'll ask if you guys have anything to add. Otherwise, we can keep on keeping on.
So I think that's probably a good moment to add to a point that I had while reading this book and while listening to the last episode that you guys did for the ogres. And Eric was talking about how there were things that were missing out of that book. Same thing here. There were things that are missing out of this book.
Quick question, bro. Just a second. Patron of the show, Mealhorn. I was going to ask this later, but if you're going to talk about it now, I'll just bring it up. Patron of the show, Mealhorn. They ask, with the addition of new units, has some lore disappeared compared to older books? That's not exactly what he's asking, but if we're going to talk about stuff that's missing, here's your trigger. There you go, Mealhorn. Go. Well,
here's the thing: is that when we had, and I'm going to go back into the Warhammer Fantasy Battles because it's the closest thing we have to talking about this idea. We had some ideas that were there and then dropped in Warhammer Fantasy Battles just because there's a certain number of pages for every battle tome, every army book. And when you write a new one, you have to add something in. One of the things that happened in Warhammer Fantasy Battles is you would look for the new paragraphs, right? There would be everything that you had already read before, and then you would look for like the 10 or 12 new paragraphs that introduced a new unit type or something else that you hadn't realized about what had happened before. And so it was something that was worth doing to go back and find the old army books because you would find these tidbits of lore that were really interesting. Now we have that in Age of Sigmar, but as opposed to in Warhammer Fantasy Battles, when those pieces of lore were overruled because everything was happening at the same time, those pieces of lore were specific to a specific place in time, right? So because the battle tome for Slaves to Darkness is now in 3.0, some of the stories from 2.0 are not realm changing anymore. Some of the stories from 2.0 are about characters that may have died, right? Or may have had things happen to them. And so it's actually worth going back and finding old battle tomes to find those pieces of lore, but they're no longer overruled. We haven't said, oh, that's not how the world works anymore, which is what happened in Warhammer Fantasy Battles a lot. Of like, whatever happened to the wizard with the machine gun? Oh, he doesn't exist anymore. Whatever happened to the Famir? Oh, they weren't there. There was a classic mini. Aaron's giving me questioning looks.
No, the machine gun is what I'm questioning. There's what?
There was a wizard with a full machine gun that was canon in Warhammer before Warhammer Fantasy Battles.
Was it a machine gun or was it a cannon? Paul,
it was literally a machine gun. It was like Uzi. A full wizard with the hat and everything, right?
Well, no, I mean,
isn't it like a belt-fed gun? It looks like an auto stubber or a heavy stubber.
It is crazy.
Yeah, and he's got it like hip mounted. Like he's all angry. Yeah. It's a cool mini, and I think he was one of the early ones I got because I used him in D&D to be like, the summoner from this weird tower has a machine gun.
Yep. And so to answer that question, has lore been dropped? No. Has lore been added? Yes. But do you have to go back and look at those old battle tomes to find it? No, you can just listen to old episodes of the Mortal Realms because we talked about it when it came out.
Yeah, but this is the first. I mean, yes, this is the first Slaves to Darkness episode, though.
Yeah, well, specifically though, one thing that's not in this book because it goes War at the All Gates. There's a paragraph saying what the Soul Wars was, and then it jumps to Broken Realms. So if you want to learn more lore that it will not be in this battle tome, go listen to anything including Wrath of the Everchosen, because that book does not make an appearance on the timeline.
Yeah, true.
Nope.
It does appear in the book earlier, though,
Yes.
when
they
they talk about where he's like, I'm angry and blowing up these. I get to fight 2 Mortarks. I like how it also, in that part of the book, like, he just glosses Lady Olander being like, cool, bye. Like,
Peace.
I gotta go make a deal with Baelacor now. It'll be cool. We'll catch you later.
Goodbye.
Well, hey, speaking of Broken Realms, I guess we can hop into the AOS 3.0. What is this new age? I mean, that's, I think, maybe the question on a lot of people's minds when they get these 3.0 books is, what does this new age mean for the army that we're talking about? And so what does the era of the beasts mean for the Slaves of Darkness? How do they take it?
Not well. I feel like Kragnos shows up, and just in general, the forces of chaos are kind of like, oh, wow, he's breaking a lot of stuff. Could this be an opportunity? And the answer was an unabashed no. He's like, not today, friends.
I would say it's a totally bashed no, not an unabashed.
Yeah, it's a totally bashed no. Accurate. I mean, even those Broken Realms books, you talk about the dragon ogres, not in this book, not in another book, but they show up and they're like, hey, look, Kragnos, you're our dad, remember? And we were worshiping these guys. Look at all these cool new powers. And he smashes their temple and kills all of them in this area, and then goes on his quest. And then, he gets transferred into another fortress. Like, I'm sorry, your princess is in the wrong castle. He shows up at this castle and breaks it to smithereens too. And Kragnos goes on a clobbering spree, and 90% of it's chaos. It's just rough.
Yeah, I should say, because there is some opportunity. If you're the top dog right now, let's say Archaon, not great. If you're the dude who's trying to replace Archaon, this is perfect. 10 out of 10. Like,
oh, yeah.
He considers this an absolute win. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, you can't win in Gur. That'd be cute. Laughs Baelacor. It's a shame.
Yeah.
Speaking of Be'lakor in this time frame or in this era, obviously he has a part to play himself as well. He had his own machinations. And actually, to that end, I'll say we've talked about the cursed skies before when we did our Broken Realms reviews. But Kieran has a question, and guys, Kieran's back. And if you thought he asked a lot of questions last episode, boy, do I have a surprise for you. So much so that you're going to hear a lot of Kieran in this episode. Kieran, thank you very much for all the questions that you offered.
We got a lot of Kieran here coming up.
Yeah, you're going to be hearing a lot of Kieran. But considering how many questions you're going to hear in this, I had to cut. This is a fraction of the questions that he asked. I had to cut so many. There are many on the cutting room floor. All very good ones. We just won't have time. You know what? Kieran should get on a podcast at some point. At any rate,
that would be
Kieran
awesome.
At any rate, they ask, cursed skies, question mark. Are the cursed skies still in effect throughout the realms? Has Be'lakor updated them in any way, especially in response to the Thunderstrike armor of the Stormcast? And does he seem to care that they can escape this cursed skies? So to that end, we know that Be'lakor created the cursed skies. If you want to know how, go listen to that other episode. They're still in effect today. They're still out there. Has anything been made of like an update to it at all? Has anything transpired on that front?
Ooh, who wants to talk about it? There's one character in specific.
Yeah. So I will say there's a character that we definitely should talk about here in a moment. As far as like anything Be'lakor did to the skies themselves, he hasn't given many patches, no updates. It's a numbers game. He knows even if a percentage breaks through, he's going to get enough. He's going to get what he needs to kind of do what he needs to do, more or less.
Yeah, so it doesn't really, and there's no real expansion to the cursed guys themselves. It does reiterate the fact that like the chaos gods were pretty stoked that he did it in the first place. Mm-hmm. And I think maybe we knew that a little bit, but it's reiterated here that like chaos gods are like, "Ooh, good job. We're still not going to promote you, but like, good move. You really contributed to the mission here." But I haven't seen much updates, at least as it relates to like a web to catch Stormcast at all. So I think it just is where we left it. No real changes. But like Will mentioned, there's more to come on a particular individual when we get to our special characters. And I had forgotten to mention when we were talking about the Arab beast. Chrisling had asked, how are the slaves to darkness reacting to the arrival of Kragnos, but we touched on that a little bit.
I was just going to say, like, Archaon does have a very angry and aggressive reaction to it. We had mentioned Kragnos just gets sent to a random chaos castle. Those dudes call for help. And Archaon answers, and he brings the 8th circle of Erengard out, and they were too slow. The end of empires is faster than the slayer of kings, and he was out of there before Archaon could show up, and Archaon did the classic bad guy move of taking it out on his own guys.
Which I think that's there's the TV, or no, what is it? It's like the list of bad guy things to do. And one of the like rules to be a good villain is never take things out on your own dudes. Cause it just ruins your whole organization.
Just ruins morale.
Yeah. So I didn't know at the end of Broken Realms that the fortress to which they sent Kragnos was an important place. And maybe it was only made important retroactively, but like in the moment, I just thought, well, here's this random place that they sent him to. It was a chaos fortress. Haha, isn't that funny? And he smashed the whole thing down. But apparently, it was a relatively big deal in Gur, right? He was still in Gur, enough so that Archaon was going to roll up and try and like stop him. And then, as we found out, he was too late. So it's rare that Battletomes actually like continue a given story beat. I thought that was just going to be a one and done and dropped, but no, it actually continued on. It actually informs the current state to some degree of what the Slaves to Darkness are doing today.
I think it not only informs it, I feel like it actually adds to it more.
Yeah.
So, for example, it says that Archaon had pulled strings to send both Sigvald and Gludos or Scorlion towards Excelsis. I don't know that we knew that before. I don't know.
So we did. It was never in any of the Broken Realms books, but there was a short story where the two of them are like fighting, and then they get distracted and are too busy fighting each other that they never show up in time.
Yeah. But I don't remember that Archaon was the one who sent them, is kind of my point.
Oh, gotcha.
Right? And Archaon.
Yeah, you're right.
Right? And so what we're seeing here is we're seeing Be'lakor win, and we are seeing Archaon lose.
Yeah.
His plan doesn't come to fruition. And then he decides, well, they didn't do it. I'm going to go myself, and I'm going to go find them. Right? But then his plan, again, doesn't come to fruition. We have the poster boy, biggest name character there is in Slaves to Darkness, and he is constantly losing. We have never had a Battletome where the main character, the main driver of the entire force, just loses and loses and loses. And that's a completely different way. Like, usually, even if we had a main character that didn't succeed, the story would be told from the perspective of he did everything that he could, right? Or he still gets to lead the army because he's amazing, right? Because if you read the Seraphon and you read about Lord Croak, he's failed over and over again. He failed to actually preserve the old world. But in his Battletome, he's still the hero. He's still the center of the story. In this Battletome, Archaon is still the hero, but he's not winning anymore. His victory was in the old world. Be'lakor's victory is in the new world, is really what this Battletome said to me. And so they're not only saying that he's losing, but they're tying up these loose threads that they had left from Broken Realms. Where did Kragnos go to? He went to this specific place. Who was trying to stop him? It was Archaon, but you know what? He was too late, right? And it's awesome. It's awesome to see that written in that style because it's completely different from anything else that we've seen written before.
All he does is lose, 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 no matter what. Yeah, so...
I mean, with like another example, this is Gardas Steel Soul, right? Like Gardas's win record is shorter than me, and I'm like 211 most days. me and the gnomes, right? But like he doesn't do a great job of winning. He's at best, I'm gonna slow him down. And I think that but you read the Stormcast book, and Gardas is a hero. Gardas is somebody who's given so much all the time for the cause of Sigmar and goodness. Then he makes Archaon look like a real winner, right? And then you get to this book, and it's like Archeon fails. Like, what? It feels like we're bullying him. Like, the book feels like it's like a bunch of the Varangard like standing around the bubbler, and Archeon comes up. He's like, "What's up, guys?" And they're like, "Oh, you suck. I mean, have some water."
Yeah.
Mhm.
And it's kind of like jumping out of this section of straight stories, but like, yeah, he fails so badly and takes it out on his own guys to the point that the Varangard, the group of folks who specifically followed him, a whole circle, are no longer kind of giving praise to Archeon. They're kind of looking to someone else for leadership. Like he's fumbling the ball that hard.
But not you, though. You're still neutral.
Yeah, I'm still neutral.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But he sucks. But no sides.
That dude sucks. So a lot of times the way I classify these battle tomes is, does this battle tome push even try to push the story forward at all, or is it purely a retrospective on things that we've already known? This one, I think, leans towards the camp of, it gives us a little bit of glimpse into forward facing new information that we didn't know about the present day. And to that end, I will give this book credit. It'll factor into my review when we get to the end, for sure.
Yeah. I'm going to tie in one other question here from Bremen. Does the book touch on Archeon the Everchone's reaction to Bellacor's plotting and scheming? Absolutely. What we've just been talking about is in there, but then we also have him trying to defend the 8 points as well. And so we get the stuff from Wrath of the Everchosen. We're getting more and more plot threads to go through with that. So yeah, if that's something you're interested in, there is a ton of information about that all throughout this book. It's awesome.
Yeah, right on. All right. Era Beasts, current day timeline, current events. Any other thoughts about these topics?
It was nice to know what the Ogroid feel like with Kragnos, and I felt
Yep.
that was just a nice way to tie it up. That he's like, cool, they need to go, right? These guys are all angry and fighty. Archeon's like, cool, why don't you go siege Gur?
Yeah.
Right? Cute story, bro. Go break your homies.
If you say so. Eesh.
But I thought that was a neat way to go about showing what the Ogroids were with the new models and with the models that have been out for a while. It's one of those races, kind of like the Fulmoroid Crushers came out and they're like, this is what they are and this is how they work and this is how they do. But the Ogroids, I feel like they needed this explanation, especially with a larger model range coming out and with more fluff being needed. I think they needed a little extra story push.
Yeah.
And this little blurb here gives them so much.
And it's neat that like this relatively new race already has like 3 separate like unit entries, which is more than most like new races ever.
Right.
So like that it's almost its own army at this point. The Ogroids.
So the other thing is the legacy of the Slayer. And so obviously at this point, if you haven't understood it, I love Archeon and I love his story. And there's a lot of Archeon in this book. The story Legacy of the Slayer talks about Vandus Hammerhand. And it talks about why he's having these visions, right? We saw a lot of that in Broken Realms. He's having these visions because the Slayer of Kings, right? Oh, this is like, also, by the way, he's chained up when he's not on missions in the Sigmar Oblum. In case you were wondering why we haven't heard anything from him, because he's literally been chained up because he can do terrible things now.
That's sad.
Right? Mortar Catacros, his soul rehoused in a new body after his duel, and his thoughts are invaded by visions of chaos. Each time he has his mortal form destroyed, and his mortisans build him a new body of bone, but it makes little difference. Right? We've got a Mortar going crazy because of this, right? And this is my favorite. And in Shaman, deep in the bowels of a quicksilver volcano, the solar drake Igmax opens one baleful eye, a glimmer of dark magic within. Like, so you brought up a bunch of plot threads that were left hanging and made them continue to go forward. And then you started even more. Awesome. Like, fantastic. That's exactly what I want to read in the Battletome.
Probably one of, if not my favorite parts of the entire book is talking about like those effects. I'll mention Kieran had asked a question about this. It was a long question. I won't go through the whole thing, but he wanted to know about those very things. So then with that all being said, I can cap this timeline thing off by saying or asking another question from Fredericks, who wanted to know, given after all that timeline, all the things that have happened, all the events that we've seen that have occurred because of or to the Slaves of Darkness, do we still think, are the Slaves of Darkness still the dominant mortal faction in the realms, or has the forces of order or death or destruction stabilized things? Are they still the man to beat?
Yes.
I'm seeing thumbs up. I'm seeing pointer fingers up, which is a weird way to do that.
You said man to beat, so I was pointing up.
Oh, gotcha.
'Cause he's the man on top.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah, the book still calls it out that the vast majority of the realms are still chaos. There's been a lot of setbacks. Chaos is on the back foot, but they're still the top dog.
I would argue against. I think this book talks about the setbacks they're having, but the regularity with which they're having setbacks and the slow plod forward isn't indicative of them being the top dog anymore. It very much seems to me that Bael'Akor is going to let Archaon fail and let the great upheaval happen, right? And watch chaos forces burn so he can come back and reclaim and be that pillar against. When they talk about the story of Eternus, and I know we're going to get there, it talks about how he's sitting under the skies of Kaimon just so he can kind of enjoy it, right? You've got an empty throne on one hand with Archaon, and you have Bael'Akor going, cool, man, like, look what I've done. What have you done lately, Archaon? Oh, that's right, lost a fortress, lost there, lost here, lost here. You can barely even keep the Ogoroids in check because a god woke up. Oh, big scary Archaon. I thought you were going to fight 4 chaos gods and show them what's up. Isn't that what you said? Isn't that what you said? And I think right now the big dog to beat, right, is when you look at where those setbacks happen, it's against the Greenskins. It's against the orders of the forces of destruction. You see mega gargants showing up in battles that they just weren't ready for. You see, ogres destroying all sorts of things throughout the realms as they go. And you see the Greenskins and the Green Tide. You see Godrak on a winning streak that just the only time it's been slowed up is when he tied with Kragnos this one time. Like
a loose definition of tied, but okay, sure.
Oh no, I mean, I think he had him.
Then he walked away from the fight. Yes, I guess that is probably a tie.
Yeah, he did pretty good. Yeah, I mean, he lost his Maw Crusher, and that's sad because Kragnos is also a team-killing friendo. But
I mean, I'm Team Gordrak. I'm Team Gordrak for sure. So
yeah. No, I think they're the ones to beat right now. I think if you're looking at there's plenty of chaos, but Gur has been a losing front for literally everybody but destruction.
Sure.
And that's a flashpoint right now. You look at Cayman, we just talked about it in the Zeech thing. There's only one Lord of the Crux, but it also doesn't talk about the forces of destruction that are elsewhere in Cayman that we see in other books that are winning. You see other forces pushing things in. God beasts are waking up. Those are forces of destruction. They're not going to sign up to be like, hey, we're friends with chaos because, we're buddy-buddy with these things that hunted us down. But with Kragnos waking up and waking up God beasts, everybody should feel on the back foot, with the exception of, I think, the destruction forces who are hunting down God beasts and hunting down anything that looks remotely close to civilization just to smash it. Cute, you have an organization based on meritocracy, chaos. That'd be real shame if we broke down your walls and killed your leaders.
It's wild to me that destruction looks at chaos and says, too organized. None.
Right.
No thank you.
Yep. Houses neat. Yeah. Touch some grass, buddy.
Yeah. This is the era for that. Yes, I agree to some degree.
Yes.
Agree to some degree that in the era of Beast, yes, there is the element of ascendancy to destruction, and because of that, the chaos is going to be on the back foot for sure. Yeah, cool. All right, that's where things lie currently. How about we keep on going? How about we leave the timeline behind? Let's live in the now and talk about how this faction is organized, which is a very vague question, but as much as you can say any chaos faction is organized, how do we find that the Slaves to Darkness is organized, besides the fact that Archaon is at the tippy top? Do you get anything about the organizational elements strike you guys, or how they live while they're kicking it at home?
It's very much the path to glory, right? I'm going to be stronger. I'm going to have to beat my leader. I'm going to have to beat my next person. I think the Warcry short in the Inferno book, I think it was Inferno 5, where the Spire Tyrants show up and they're fighting the Corvus Cabal, and the main character of the story kills all the Corvus and then more things happen, not to spoil stories. So it turns into, I'm not only going to be the best, I'm going to be the best of the best. I'm going to be so strong that Archaon, or the demon prince that the unmade follow, or the local chaos lord, or the dominar, I want to be the person that they are, or I want to be noticed by them to the point where I can kill them and take their glory and build a warband of my own and declare things for myself. And you see that in a lot of the story writing, right? It's in the Red Feast. It's in a lot of the shorts in general, where they just, I'm going to be the bigger, better, stronger, regardless of if it's the Warcry novels or any of the other stuff that's out there.
To some surprise, the faction that worships chaos is not very organized, because it is just all those war bands where everyone's just trying to one-up each other. Some war bands are stagnant because everyone's just backstabbing each other, and then those that grow just absorb more, and it's just this constant churn. It's the meat grinder of people seeking glory.
Well, and the thing I like about this book too is that it talks about how every war band, every group is led by some kind of charismatic leader, and they have different ways of defining who that charismatic leader is. Either they have the most mutations, or they're the best fighter, or they just give the best speeches. Like, it can be literally anything. But even when they have a little force organization chart, and they're like, it's this war band led by this guy, and this war band led by this guy. And that's always something I really liked, because the first army I ever bought was Slaves to Darkness way back in the day. And back then, in 5th edition Warhammer Fantasy Battles, in order to build an army, first you had to build a hero, and then you built a retinue for that hero. And then you bought another hero, and you bought a retinue for that hero. And the amount of points you spent on the hero was how large that retinue was allowed to be. And this book very much reads like the armies are structured like that. There's a hero, and then he has a retinue based on how powerful he is, and then another hero with a retinue. So it's not that Archaon is leading Archaon's army. Archaon is leading he's leading the army, but the army is all led by these other subcommanders and these other followers of those subcommanders. So that was, I like that a lot, because it's a callback to Warhammer Fantasy Battles and how they originally did it, but just, it's a really interesting way to organize an army. And I think it's fun. It's super cool.
Yeah.
This is, I think, the first, or maybe the only Slaves to Darkness book that I've ever read, but it's noteworthy to me that it includes the Warcry war bands in here and really makes them, a core component to the army, which is pretty neat.
Yeah.
And because of that, I bring it up now because so many of those cultures are so diverse. One of the hallmarks of how does the faction live at home? Where home oftentimes being the 8 points if they're not out, crusading. And it's full of these disparate cultures that have found themselves in this 8 point. And there is no one way in terms of how they live at home. It's such a wide range of cults that for every permutation of a chaos god that exists out there, some interpretation of what it means to follow chaos, there's a cult that follows it that way. And although we have 10 or something double digits number of these Warcry war bands at this point, that those are just a small fraction of just the diversification of what it means to be a cult following chaos. And so the point being is there's no one way to follow chaos as it relates to the Slaves to Darkness. Like, Khorne likes it one way, Nurgle likes it one way, but when you're sort of that undivided, you're still trying to figure out what it means to follow chaos. Like, there is no right answer, which I thought was pretty neat. I mentioned the 8 points. By no means is that the only place that you're going to find the followers of chaos. In fact, we've explicitly said that they control a lot of the moral realms at this point. However, if you definitively wanted to find followers of Archaon and the undivided chaos gods, a great place to look would be in the 8 points. I think we had a couple questions sort of covering around the 8 points. Does it spend much time talking about the 8 points or like the Varenspire at all? I'm surprised. I thought there'd be more, frankly. Did anything jump out at you guys in this year book about that place?
They do talk a little bit about how after Archaon fails to do anything about Kragnos, he comes back, and he does go through the realm gate where Gordrak is with all the spider fang, and he just kind of blasts through because he's like, I'm not dealing with you right now. You're not the person I'm concerned with. So he uses the realm gate that Gordrak has, and then he also comes back and assaults the Arc Terminus, which was from the Wrath of the Everchosen. So we do have some momentum moving forward, but as is appropriate for the commander who refuses to sit on the throne until he's conquered everything, we don't actually get much of the Varenspire, which is a little sad because it is the capital, and usually you would think the capital would have some kind of like city map or something, which they've been doing a lot lately, and we don't have that in this Battletome.
It's around this topic that I'm maybe most disappointed about the book, and I think a couple of people had asked questions that I won't even ask because we didn't get many of the answers for it. But A, I would have liked to spend more time there for sure. B, Paul, you just mentioned one of my biggest hang-ups about this book is 2 different times Archaon goes blowing through a realm gate, one of the major realm gates, into the 8 points that are controlled by other people, which previously were huge story beats that like they finally were able to wrest control of these realm gates back. And so Death was able to get the end gate, and Destruction, it was a big deal that they like wrangled the worm that the gate was in the mouth of. So it was important that those gates were taken by somebody else. Big gains. And you're trying to tell me Archaon can just waltz through it whenever he wants? Then what was the point? Like, why did we even care then? If he could just roll up, I understand. Like, maybe it was a quick like jaunt through. He's super powerful. By no means would he be able to control it. Yada yada yada. If you can walk through it, then it's not a big deal that someone else owns it, which was a bummer to me. It didn't have to be that way. If you wanted to get him to Gur, he can take 6 different other realm gates to get there. He didn't have to go through the one that was owned by somebody else. He owns all the other ones. That was dumb.
I will go back, not to counter your point, because your point is very valid, right? But I will go back to how this book is set up, where Archaon is losing.
Sure.
And so I think the reason why they didn't talk about those is because those are Archaon winning, right? He went to go through the Realm Gate, and he succeeded. He went to go assault the Arc Terminus, and he succeeded. But that's not the theme of this book, because the theme of this book is that Archaon is losing and Bellicor is winning.
I mean, I didn't argue with you guys before. I don't intrinsically think that is completely the point, but I won't. I'll let you have that for sure.
Well, no, but you can argue. You are allowed to argue.
No, I don't want to.
I don't want to.
I argue all the time. Are you kidding me?
It's almost like the narrator of the book has a bias towards one side over the other.
Quite possibly. Well, and Bellicor's new. He's like a newer model, and like this sort of sub. We're going to talk more about it, but the division is kind of a newer thing, and they want to focus on it. The third thing that was bothering me, it was related to not spending more time on the Varenspire, is what they do spend time on is a whole double page spread plus a map on the next page about like the history of Akshi. Frankly, I do not care. That is unrelated to the thing that we're reading about right now. Sure, like they give lip service to like some Slaves to Darkness, but they spend just as much time talking about like Khorne's history in Akshi. How did that make it into the book? Like that not necessary, unnecessary. Focus on the topic it can. I'm going to need you to focus up. And that was such a jarring inclusion that it really had no place in the book, if you ask me.
I think it's a downside of a thing I praised the book for earlier, which is, this book set the table for when Age of Sigmar kicked off all those years ago. It kicked off in this area, so they felt like they needed to catch up that area in this book where they didn't need to.
No.
Khorne was the bad guy in the first battle box, not Slave to Darkness in general.
Yeah.
They could have done away with that part.
Sure. They should have done the double page spread and then the map. That should have been 8 points. That should have been Varenspire or Bloodwind Spoil or any of those places. And wait, Bloodwind Spoil is Warcry, right? Yeah. It should have been any of those places. It was a real. Plus, we don't get a lot of those maps, right? I mean, I guess it was in Warcry, but heck, I bet that there's a lot of people who are into AOS who don't do Warcry, which is dumb. You should do both. Who don't know much about it? That would have been the place to do it. So that was a weird misstep, if you ask me.
Well, Warcry gets so much love in this book, anyways, that like it would have made perfect sense to have that double page spread because there's a multiple page spread of the different Warcry warbands.
Yeah.
So it would have been cool to see a map of that, to be paired with it.
Yeah. Mistake. Do you guys have more thoughts?
I think one of the reasons they might not have done that was in that the warbands are now, they're trying to show that they're not just the 8 points. Yeah. So it become like maybe a crisis of image. Like, here's where they live in the 8 points. This is where most of the Untamed Beasts roam, and this is where the Darko Savagers roam. But also, they're everywhere else too, right? And I think it would maybe give them that conflict of identity.
Yeah. Which I've also spoken at length on how much I wish they'd just stay in the 8 points for Warcry, but that's a different conversation entirely. I think they should probably just do other wedges of the 8 points, but that's fine. Did I ask Chrisling's question? Did I get into the topic without actually asking the prompt?
What's the question?
The Chrisling's question was, how much control do the non-chaos factions have over the 8 points now? I think that's how I got into my whole spiel about the gates. So sorry, Chrisling, I asked out of order. That's really common for me now at this point.
I'd say I guess based on what you were saying, the amount of control they have is like a toll booth operator that never collects the toll.
It's like driving through one of those open road tolls without the iPass.
Yeah.
Just doing whatever you want and then not going online and paying for it later. Yeah, it was wild. And then Chrisling also asked this, if there's anything about Karngrad or the other cities surrounding the Varenspire. That was an example of a nope, which missed opportunity. So shame. Do you guys have any other thoughts on home, whatever home means for Slaves to Darkness? How do they live?
I guess whenever you have the feeling of just kind of tearing things up and casting it aside, that's where home is.
Home is where you rip somebody else's heart out.
Yeah. Home is where their heart is.
There you go. That's a better way to phrase it. We workshopped that one. That was a team effort, I'd like to say. All right. So let's talk about talking about others, right? That are expanding out. How do they deal with other people? Conquest is the name of the game. They've already conquered a lot of the moral realms. They've lost a little bit of it. And they took that personally. They're out to regain it. That's maybe the faction holistically what their goal is. I wonder, maybe we talk about a little bit what Archaon's goals are right now. Do you guys have any insight on that front? What's Archaon? Like, what's he actually up to? What's he trying to do? I'll answer my own question. Don't make me. I mean, he's got a couple of things, right? He's trying to break into his ear. He's trying to use...
yeah, that's his big one.
That's another... I have another bone of contention with that, too. He's trying to usher in sort of a complete chaotic control over the realms, but to use that as leverage to, like, topple the chaos gods himself. Surprise, surprise. He doesn't even like his own gods, right? He uses their means to an end, which is to say that their own end. And he really truly wants to be like the only one left standing. I don't even know if he personally wants to be standing anymore. Is this one like a death wish kind of on his end too? Like, does he want to see it all topple? I don't know.
He's just tired of walking around. He just wants to sit on the throne. Everything that he's done in this entire book is literally just because I just want to sit on my throne. Why don't you guys let me sit on my throne?
So tired. Yeah. That's true.
Well, and I think they try and pass it off a couple times as like, he's just so industrious. Like, oh, look at all the things he does. He never is home. That's why it's an empty throne. But like, I mean, the other part of it, right? So you have in this strata of meritocracy, Archaon's at the very, very tippy top because he's got the relics, he's got the experience, he's an incredible general, he's all these wonderful things. So when it comes to somebody invaded the 8 points, all the other less competent generals are less competent. And so they get smoked, right? Like Lady O grabs one of the Chaos Lords and just melts his brain to death. It's like, cool. And he gives him the end of Indiana Jones and he wrinkles away to nothing because she just does. And when Archaon's your answer, right? And he's your beat stick to defend against Kragnos and Godrak and all of the different monsters and things that go bump in the night for chaos. When he's your answer, he has to be everywhere because eventually you're out of your depth, Chaos Lord, or you're out of your depth, Varangard, or you're out of your depth, Baelacor, and you need an Archaon to just like fly through, all the Spider Fang and Godrak going, this is our place. Yeah, he just flies through because he's got other things to do. There's another group of chaos dying someplace else that he needs to go save. So he kind of flies around like Infinite Superman. He probably doesn't sleep much because he's like, there's always some chaos idiot in trouble. And eventually I'm going to want that thing to be not in trouble. So he's running around putting out fires. So I'd be mad too. I'd be like, look, Varangard, like I needed like 2 minutes at the bubbler. And they're like, oh, you guys stink. You're so bad, Archaon. Empty throne. And he's like, I literally just saved the realm because you guys were at the bubbler. Like, what were you even doing? So like break time's over. Get back to it.
like he's in the stage where he sounds like someone like me with ADHD, just trying to get one thing done. Like, okay, I need to assemble models. Well, I need to clear off the table. Well, now I need to organize all this stuff. Great, a light bulb just went out. Oh, fantastic, this happened. Like he's never able to get to the task at hand because he's doing too many emergency tasks.
If he could just find a phone booth, he could change out of his Superman costume and he could just like sit still for a little bit. There's no phone booth in the Mortal Realms.
What would a good if you've got time to lean, you've got time to clean? What would a good example of that be for Archaon?
You've got time to lay, you've got time to slay.
If you've got time to chill, you've got time to kill.
I knew you guys would have good ones. That's why I do this. Right on.
So good.
Right. We talked, or I alluded to enemies. I feel like everybody's Archaon's enemies, or the Slaves to Darkness' enemies, right? Even the Chaos Gods themselves are essentially their enemies. Is there anyone that isn't their enemies, or is it a boring answer in that it's everybody is their enemy?
So, yes. Chrisling has a question here. Who is Archaon's best friend? I referenced it before, but there's actually a specific name. The demon Lord Zeronax. And he claims to have spoken with Archaon as an equal. So that's his buddy. And that's his theoretical man.
Archaon's official response is, who?
Yeah. Never.
Yes.
This is, I think, one of those true armies where, like, literally there is no one who is their friend. I mean, possibly you could argue that individual Chaos God factions are kind of, but even them, not really. Like, the end results, we're going to take you out too eventually, given enough time. So
terrible work environment.
Yeah. Pretty straightforward.
The amount of like betrayals and one-upsmanships within this faction is pretty scathing. Just throwing it out there.
Yeah, true. That's another faction that everyone is your enemy. That's another good example.
And they also don't like them either. So
yeah. No, thank you. All right. Well, let's talk about some units then. We'll hop into that arena. I'll ask you guys first. Are there any units, models, things, entries in this book that speak to you on a lore level, maybe from a visual level,
yes,
not from a rule level? Don't you dare bring them up. I don't care.
I actually am going to bring that up slightly.
You son of a bee. All right.
But it ties into lore.
Okay.
I wasn't good at this time. Just saying. I was like, there's rules. I won't say anything.
But let me explain. The rule itself doesn't matter. The option it gives you and the option that it provides to the lore does matter.
Well, perfect.
Which is, the unit is Demon Princes. They are the peak manifestation of the path to glory. If you are a mortal in the Slaves to Darkness, Demon Princehood is where you want to be. The rule that changed that helps the lore out is finally Demon Princes can be undivided. Because I believe in the old world, Be'lakor was the only, he's the first prince. He was also the only undivided Demon Prince. Up until this point, even if you check the app right now, since it's not updated with the book, you cannot have an undivided Demon Prince. And this book finally provides it.
Okay.
So there are now options for you to attain that title without having to swear to a specific god. Nice. Which I think is a great new addition to the lore that the game itself was limiting before, even if we may have had them in the lore.
Mm. Hey, well, approved. Seal of approval. You get my stamp. Nice.
And they have a great saving... No.
click. Booted. Will has been fired from this podcast and also the Discord. Vent. Give me any faves jump out at you in the range.
I'm not just wearing a Dogs of Warcry shirt, but pretty much all the Warcry stuff is always cool to see.
Yeah, that's my jam.
And just like giving again more Fomoroid Crushers, more Raptorix, more Furies, more Mind Seers, Pharynx, giving them all a little bit more of a moment in the light in this book has just been great. I have to go pretty hard for those Chaos Legionnaires. I like the models. I like everything hobby-wise that I've been able to do with those. But they're really just like, I think they really hit home with where I'm at most of the time too. Archaon is an imposter. Like they are hard believers in the Be'lakor cult. And I think that the Chaos Legionnaires as such just like they get me right in the feels. I'm like, yeah, Archeon, like you literally had Sigmar without a weapon crying in his own little glass cage of emotion, and you're like, cute, we've got other things to do that aren't beat you all the way, like finish the job. And I feel that like the Chaos Legionnaires have that feel and have that like that mindset, and it vibes with me pretty well. Like just figure it out.
Yeah. Slight correction, he didn't have no weapon, he did have razzle and dazzle.
Thanks for not forgetting. I appreciate it. Since you're talking about the Warcry warbands, and maybe I could have asked it earlier, but I'm going to ask now. Kieran had another question. Of course he did. Asking about whether or not does the book shed any light on whether the deities like the Great Gatherer of the Corvus Cabal or the Devourer of Existence for the Untamed Beast, these are those Warcry warbands, are those distinct chaos gods or aspects of one of the big four aspects of Chaos Undivided? Does the book go into that at all?
Yes.
Tell me more.
It is in the beginning of the book, talks about Archeon, and he says it is seen as a manifestation of dark powers by many of the tribes in his thrall. The tribes of the Untamed Beasts worship him as the Eater of Worlds, while the shadowy Corvus Cabal see him as an avatar of their avaricious demon god.
Gotcha. So, and then I'll ask then. So they see him as as an avatar of that god. Is that god, do we think, still one of the four chaos powers, or is it some of these other like primordial chaos stuff that we don't necessarily get named or named regularly? Same thing, or are they distinct from Tzeentch, Khorne?
My personal answer, because I don't think the book does answer this clearly. My personal answer actually comes from the latest 40K reveal stream, where they revealed new demigods and demons spawn from other ideas that are not associated with the four gods. And if it can happen in 40K, I think the same thing could happen here, where there is a separate chaos entity that is the manifestation of what the Corvus Cabal worship.
Well, and I think you see that in some of what the Unmade worship, because is it a demon prince? Is it a greater demon? And having the abilities and the powers in what they worship, in both systems, the belief begets power, right?
Yeah.
And so you get into a chicken and egg thing in a lot of this, where you have, okay, did these guys, did the Unmade believe in the Lord of Pain before or after that greater demon existed? Did he start this cult, then wander off, and then these cultists and pilgrims try and follow him or her all the way to the end? It gets kind of funky that way, but whatever they believe in will give it power. So for the Untamed Beast, right, you talk about the Great Devourer in their little blurb. They worship all of chaos as the devourer of existence, but Archeon is the eater of worlds, and they long to join the hunt, is the exact quote from the book. They look at the chaos in general. There's different aspects of the devourer, right? Maybe this razor tusk is going to be a razor tusk of Tzeentch, and it's going to see and eat magic eaters, and it's going to be that kind of kill the magic users, eat the magicians, to gain more power. Or maybe it'll be rock tusk prowler. But maybe it'll be one of Khorne, where it just likes to delight in the kill and always is hunting and has eaten some of the weaker members of the group. They would see it as different aspects. And I think that those different aspects in their own right would gain power. You see it in Necromunda too, with the Meat for the Meat Lord corpse grinder cult guys, right? Where it's a greater demon of Khorne, but because Khorne isn't known to those chaos cultists in the same vein, they know of this meat god that has shown up a couple times on the planet, and they've recently resummoned him in the Book of Ruin a few years ago, right? So these aspects do exist, and they do show up across multiple platforms, and I think that that's kind of cool that they could do their own thing. And it also makes greater demons feel a little bit more impactful, I think. because you have it doesn't have to be Khorne incarnate. It can be, or a Zeech incarnate. It can be a Lord of Change or a Bloodthirster that's leading, the Corvus Cabal, or, maybe the Corvus Cabal have been worshiping the Great Gatherer, but really it's Khorne who wants shiny gubbins and skulls specifically of your foes, right? It wouldn't necessarily have to be a Nurgle, or it wouldn't have to be a Zeech, or, maybe they're not after secrets. Maybe it's something else. And finding a greater demon that's somewhere in between, or finding a greater demon prince somewhere in between that is empowered by those beliefs and those gifts and those sacrifices. I think that's very on brand for the lore.
For the longest time, I thought it was really cool that like they were worshiping on like lesser known aspects, or they only saw a small part of what is it, the thing about the elephant where the blind man like touches like the leg, or the bunch of blind men like touch a leg or a trunk or something like that, and they get a different image of what an elephant is because they're touching different parts. I always like that, like translating that to the Warcry warbands, and that like they only know some aspect of the bigger chaos gods because those are really the only 4 that exist. So part of me thinks that that's the answer. However, I think that the horns of Hashut lends credibility to the fact that actually, no, maybe these are all separate, distinct, individual, whether they're deities or demi-deities or, greater demons or something like that, because I think we'll find out soon enough that Hashut is clearly his own thing, isn't one of the 4 chaos gods, and his warband worships him. And so if he can exist as this independent entity, there's no reason that all the other ones can't also be their independent entities too. So maybe there's a mix. Maybe some are chaos gods, maybe some aren't. But like the fact that they got included in this book without really even explaining why they're like this undivided, they reference the shit and they just sort of throw them in the mix. Makes me think that like this is a small part to like a larger whole that comes out later.
An interesting wrinkle is like there's a clear divide between, now we're getting too much into Warcry, but the Warcry season 1,
no such thing,
warbands were all like these various different aspects, but everything that's been chaos focused in 2nd edition has been, they specifically follow Be'lakor. It's a different way to follow Nurgle. It's a cool way to do Tzeentch. They do Hashut. So it's like they are following beings that kind of already exist in weird ways. And like with the Jade people, I think it said like they worship Tzeentch. They don't quite know exactly whether or not it's Tzeentch, but it is Tzeentch. Mm-hmm. Whereas a lot of these other warbands, they don't make any distinction like that at all. Mm-hmm. They keep it vague.
Sure. These are all great points, and I like the conversation that arises from it. I like the fact that we don't know even, or like that there can be a mix, or some are some way and some are some the other. That's why Warcry is cool as heck.
So good.
Someone should make a podcast about that. All right, Paul. Wait,
agreed.
I didn't ask Paul yet. Paul, what were your units or things that jumped out at you in the range?
I always liked the Varangard. In the old world, Archaon had his bodyguards, which were the Swords of Chaos, and that's basically what the Varangard have become. But there are so many of them, and there's a book that we read forever ago about the Varangard and about Varanspire that really goes into depth on this, and I like that book a lot, which it may be why I like this unit type so much. But there are 8 circles of Varangard. Like there are so many that they each have their own power base in the Varanspire and stuff. And it's just super cool to have these little demigods of Archaon himself. Like he is such a powerful being that like even his lieutenants are just massively important. And so I like the models. I like the background. So super cool.
Hey, guess who had a question about Varangard?
Was it Kieran?
Surprise, it was Kieran. They want to know who are the Varangard exactly? Demons, mortal followers of chaos? Are they warlords in their own right? Or do they solely function as bodyguards for Archaon? Varangard are cool because like they get called to Archaon whether they like it or not. Like it's like their own brand of a path to glory, kind of. In that like at one point where they reach whatever the height of their power is, they start seeing Archaon's brand anywhere. Like it's like in a blood spray or like some flaming sigil in the sky, and like. It's almost assured that they know that they don't get to be that powerful without knowing Archaon's sign. Like he shows up on the caller ID. And so either they're like, oh, I got to pick it up. Or maybe they're excited to pick it up. Maybe they're waiting for that call their whole life. Or they can send it to voicemail. But Arkai, he's going to keep calling, and he's not going to stop calling. And so, like, I bet he's going to come for you one way or the other. And if, like, you can spend your whole life running from him, but it probably won't be a very long life. So I thought that was cool. To Kieran's question about did they solely function as a bodyguard, I wouldn't necessarily say so, because there's so many of them that they're not always around Archaon, and oftentimes they are in positions of power in the Varen Spire because Archaon's off doing whatever Archaon does. And so, like, to that end, no, not bodyguards, but rather like rulers in his stead, which is interesting too.
In fact, one of the factions is the Varen Guard without Archaon. So they do definitely go out and do their own things. They have their own missions to further the mission of chaos. Yeah,
they're super cool. One of the cooler models in the range for sure. One of my faves, honestly, the Warband Warcries the Warcry Warbands are my faves. It's such a diverse cast in what like sometimes feels like a pretty one note army. In that, like, yes, the Chosen and the Chaos Warriors and like the Knights all unified in their aesthetic, but it is kind of like one dimensional to some degree. But like the newer models in the range are fantastic. So couple that with then the diversity that is the Warcry Warbands. It's such a marked difference. It adds such color and brightness and variety in the army, which is very neat. So that's probably my favorite, but don't worry, guys. There's plenty of questions that people want to know about some of the other entries that we can run through real quick. So just in no particular order, Mealhern, again, patron of the show. Thank you very much, Mealhern, wants to know, is there a deeper dive into the Dark Oath? There is entry about the Dark Oath sort of a little bit collectively. They got brought up once or twice in the book. Did anything about the Dark Oath and all their incarnations jump out at you guys in this Battletome at all?
Not really. One thing I know Paul had mentioned outside of this recording is that it is cool that there is a reference to a Warhammer Plus character mentioned in the Dark Oath section.
Oh, is that who that was? I looked him up. I didn't know who he was.
Yes.
Gar or something?
It's the Warhammer Plus TV show. There was a Dark Oath episode versus Cities of Sigmar. So, and gotcha. I apologize. I wasn't the one who caught that. Somebody did that online, and I forgot who it is. So I apologize for not referencing that.
We talked about it in person. That's what it was.
Is it that Snow Peaks guy, or the guy who's from Snow Peaks? I think it said.
Yeah, Gunnar Brand.
Yeah, okay. He doesn't have an entry in the Lexicanum, which is where I looked it up.
They must not have a Warhammer Plus subscription then.
No, I do. I just haven't watched it yet.
No. The Warhammer Lexicanum must not.
Oh, no, they must not. Yeah, possibly. Because he was mentioned right alongside the gal from Underworlds and the Warcrane, whose names I no longer remember.
But like, for a second, let's just... and this is just cool to me, maybe I'm just doesn't match with Dork. It's just cool to me, but like,
be the judge of that.
For the first time, we get to reference media that is not a book and other things you can watch to learn more about this faction, right? Like, and to me, that episode of Hammer and Bolter is the best place to find out more about the Dark Oath that we have right now. I don't think we have a book about them. So yeah, that's pretty cool that we get a reference to TV show.
I think the War Queen book. Yep.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, coincidentally, before I was on these podcasts, a lot of you were people who hang out in my community, and one of you turned me on to that book, and then a few of the other novellas, and they spawned armies for me. And when the Dark Oath Savagers came out as models, I went on a collecting spree that would make the Great Gatherer jealous and blush a little. And then, with the new book, I know we weren't talking rules, but I can play a whole Dark Oath army now. And that's very legal to play. And I am just tickled. I am thrilled to swear some oaths to the Dark Gods and take some skulls for whoever I'm worshiping that day. And it's such a good book and so impactful for the hobby. I'm just very excited to get into that part of it.
Yeah. You mentioned about swearing oaths. For those who don't know about Dark Oaths, they're basically Marauder-esque, like barbarian-esque folks that one of their hallmarks is that they are prone to making oaths and a wide range. Honestly, it can be an oath about anything. I bet you some of them can be mundane, with the idea being if they fulfill this oath, then they'll be granted some boon from the chaos gods, and so they'll swear blood oaths with their own blood or somebody else's blood, probably your blood actually, and then promise to do some grand thing. And if they succeed, then hopefully even the gods will just glance in my direction, and that'll I'll benefit from that. Or if I fail or just flat out just don't get around to it, which I'm surprised they even mentioned that, but yeah, some people just don't do it. Then you're asking for trouble. So that's the hallmark of the Dark Oath. I don't know if there's anything too much new in there. I feel like maybe we knew some of that already, but they are not excluded at the very least. How could they be? Excellent. I'm getting thumbs up. They're saying, good job, Aaron. Man,
you did it.
Good podcasting, Aaron. All right, let's ask more questions. So a couple questions about the Gaunt Summoners. Bremen had asked, what does the loss of a Gaunt Summoner or Silver Tower mean for Archaon's power or influence on the realms? I know we lost a Silver Tower that Be'lakor blew up. Does the book talk about the ramifications of that? I don't think so.
Not really.
Not really.
It made kind of like a one-off of like Be'lakor was happy because it showed that he could be beaten.
Yeah.
Kind of like Xerxes in 300. Yeah.
I feel like the Tzeentch book talked about it more than the Slaves of Darkness book does. Because I remember we had mentioned it when we talked about that book.
Sure.
And it talked about more about like Archaon's relationship and how Tzeentch was like cool with him taking them over and cool with them dying and
sold them out.
I think Tzeentch even sold them out like to Explode or something weird like that. Like
he gave Archaon all their true names, so they have to listen to him.
Yeah.
He's like, cool. How about you guys work for Archaon now? This is what I'm going to give Archaon. You guys go take your Silver Towers and go to this new house with this new guy who's going to know your true names. And the Gaunt Summoners were like, that seems bad, though.
He's your new dad now.
Yeah, he's your new dad now.
Yeah.
We had the trial while you were away, and he has full custody. Congratulations.
Gaunt Summoners are demons, right? So like they reform in the void or whatever. So like even if one dies, it's not intrinsically the end of the world for.
But he lost his Silver Tower.
That's more.
That's the main thing.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I think the Tzeentch book mentioned, like, as he's slowly coming back, Tzeentch is cool with Archaon being on the back foot, and it was kind of, like, dunking on the guy who died. Like, how could you let this happen situation.
Yep. He's like, I thought you were supposed to be some powerful wizard with your own Silver Tower. What did you do? Like, come on, no?
You got killed by a rat? Come on, man.
Yeah. Nice Silver Tower you got there. Appreciate something happened to you. All right, or happened to it. Kieran also asks, is there any insight into the relationship between Archaon and the Gaunt Summoners bound to a service? Yeah, I think Will is right. Maybe the Tzeentch book even talked a little bit more about it. So it's, I think, pretty par for the course here. Yeah. Cool. Question about the Soul Grinders. Mealhorn again, patron of the show. Thank you very much, Mealhorn. Asked, does the Soul Grinder fits in AOS? Short answer, no. Give it the boot. Doesn't need to be here anymore. Unnecessary. What do you guys think?
I would agree. I don't like the aesthetic in the core range, but I also don't like the Juggernauts in the core ranges either. They're a little bit too mechanical for me. But that being said, these are personal opinions, and whatever you want to do is fine. Because otherwise Eric would come and hound me down and say, "No, anything you do," which is true. Is your hobby. But
normally, I would say Paul's opinions don't reflect that of the podcast. However, in this particular case, Paul's opinions do reflect the opinion of the podcast.
Yes, I do not disagree. I'll just say probably what Eric would say, which is they have a war scroll, so they fit. But aesthetically,
I'm going to be awful again and disagree with all three of you.
You are awful.
That's twice tonight. I'm never getting asked back. Never.
Everyone wasn't have been last episode.
It's been really good, guys. No, I think the Soul Grinder fits. If you have cannons being held by ogres, if you have weapons like that, if you have the armor that you see on Blood Warriors, if you have the metallurgy to create those things, why would you not, in the Spiral Crux, have the ability to make a Soul Grinder? If you have the technology, Por qué no los dos? Why not? You know, like, why not? Chaos is definitely a, we should play it safe kind of group. I think they should have them. If they want them, have them. I do understand that the aesthetic of the model doesn't really fit, as they've got pretty close to Black Legion symbols on them. So that's a little different, but I think as a model, it's cool. They're huge. So they seem neat. I think having a story where the KO fight, or the Caradron fight against a bunch of soul grinders that were summoned up by a god beast waking up would be a really cool novel. I'd be all about it. Giant volley guns that are, or rail guns essentially that they have on the KO ships. Like, make it almost sci-fi, high levels of, steampunk fantasy. I think that'd be great. Find the equivalent. Or better yet, have it be chaos on chaos fighting, a slaughter brute host with a bunch of Khorne mortals run into this evil, crazy Zeech warlord who's been crafting their slaughter brutes into soul grinders, and now they must fight it out and have it be like a kaiju fight with Godzilla versus Mothra. Like, it'd be perfect. I think there's ways to make it work.
Why are you spoiling the next novel we're going to be talking about on this podcast? I mean, that's just...
Oh, my bad.
Yeah. Well, and you make a good point about like how Order can have these technologies, but Chaos can't. If Order can have souls to bind, then Chaos can have souls to grind.
Love that.
All right, we'll keep going because I always need to have the final word, and I want no response to this. Not only do I think the Soul Grinders shouldn't be in this army, but I also don't think the Slaughter Brutes or Vortex Beast should be in this army either. I think those should be excised from this particular range. Slaughter Brutes should go Khorne, Vortex Beast should go Zinj. Anyways, should we talk more about the Ogroids at all? Are we missing anything from what we brought up earlier?
Yes, because we never actually talked about the fact that Ogroids isn't actually the name for them.
True.
It's a name that people call them. Ogroid just means ogre-like. Mm-hmm. So people are like, oh, yeah, that's Ogroid. Like, oh, yeah, that's person-shaped. They're actually, the Goroa. Mm-hmm. And like they actually have like their society and civilization, and they probably don't even like the word Ogroid. It's just what Chaos calls them because Chaos is full of jerks.
Very offensive. Well, no, actually, Chaos weren't even the first ones to call them that. They were getting called Ogroids before. So we didn't really get into their history. So for those that don't know, the Ogroids were from Gur. They often fought alongside the Greenskins and like those followers of Gorka Morka. Maybe they themselves were a little bit too. But they found that they actually kind of like society a little bit. And sure, like it's when you live in Gur, you kind of like you got to ally yourself with some of the other stronger powers there. But then they started building societies, forging weapons. And they're like, man, like I like sleeping in a bed a little bit. But the Greenskins were not interested in that. And so essentially it was their rowdy friends kept destroying all their stuff, kept fighting them, and they had to defend themselves against sort of this intra-faction fighting. And they said, you know what, screw that. We gotta get out of here. We gotta find a better way. And that's how they got called to Chaos. Archaon saying, hey, look, we'll offer you like some element of like peace to some degree. Because they were also like noble warriors at the same time too, and so they took this offer, and then of course ended up getting corrupted, and now like they hang out in the Varen. For a while now, they've been hanging out in the Varen Spire, being like gladiator judges or what have you. But now they're sort of being called to action with this Kragnos arrival. Tapping back into their bestial senses, and so they're getting like let loose because how better to fight fire with fire than beasts with beasts? Yeah, that's about it. Did I get it?
Yeah, that was the majority of it. The only other thing is people always comment online, which they always be doing.
Yeah, always be commenting.
It's like, well, these are just Bulgors. They look like Minotaurs. And I do think it is cool that like GW is standing firm of like, no, these are Goroa. They are a civilization. Their whole thing is about being master craftsmen. So when they look at Bulgors, they just see creatures of destruction that are base instinct, and that's not who they are. I do think if GW had known that they were going to expand on this race past the Taumaturge, past the Myrmidon, they probably wouldn't have made it look so much like a Minotaur / Bulgor. but they're sticking to it, and they're like holding the line of like, no, this is different. We're actually going to expand on what makes them unique instead of just conceding the point and saying it's Bulgors.
Do you think GW cares one bit? They do not.
Exactly,
They,
no.
they could
0%.
They could be the spitting image, and they'd be like, no, it's different. Don't worry about it.
It'd be the same kit with just a different name on it.
Different thing.
Well,
we sell double of them. Yeah.
Yeah, twice as much.
I think it'd be interesting though, because I feel like with that, these are just new Bulgors and new Minotaur models. I think it'll be awesome when they come out with new Bulgors, if that ever happens, because those Bulgors aren't going to look like muscly slabbed super ogreoids. These are going to look something real fierce and real different, and definitely more bovine, I'm hoping, right? Whereas the ogreoids have flat faces. They have, they don't have a big muzzle like a Beast of Chaos. They have a flat face.
Yeah.
And I hope that there's lore where they're calling each other funny names, like, oh, why don't you put a muzzle on that Bulgor? Like, I think it'd be fun.
It's gonna be great.
Just a thought, isn't it kind of weird though that like they release a model that is clearly a Centaur, and then that is also, and then they soon after that release models that are very similar to Bulgors. It's like they're doing everything they can to not make a Beast of Chaos model. Just they're trying their hardest not to do it.
Well, the new Lumineth temples all going to be goat people too. So,
all right, let's keep on keeping on. We talked about units. Let's talk about some of these the sub factions. I'm surprised that the book doesn't give as much information about the sub factions as some of the other ones do. But even so, did you guys have any favorites that you want to bring up in brief?
I like the Host of the Everchosen because it's cool. Specifically because it doesn't mention the Varangard. It mentions the Knights, it mentions the Warriors, right, the Chariots, but it really doesn't go into the Varangard because they're a different faction. Mm-hmm. Because if Archaon is coming, like, he's leading his personal army, and the Varangard are kind of more of they're leading their own personal armies, right? It really reinforces the idea that each leader has their own retinue. So it's cool.
Still haven't picked a side yet, but I'm going to go with Legion of the First Prince. It did lose a lot of its identity from before, where it was entirely all demons. Oops, nothing but demons. And now it is just a sub-faction of Slaves to Darkness, so it lost, for some people, like the list building identity. But it very much is still lore-wise and narrative-wise Be'lakor, just bringing everyone into the fold, and it's his personal forces. And just seeing him slow. I mean, if we want to track the change in rules and the change in narrative, he went from manipulating demons only to now actually having mortal followers.
Yeah.
Which is a big step for him. Sure. So kudos.
Clear evolution, actually. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
He's being more inclusatory. Inclusatory, yeah. I will let everybody owe me one. That's
exactly.
Quoth Be'lakor.
I'll accept donations from everyone.
It's 2022. You gotta. Did you have a subfaction that you enjoyed?
I know it'll be surprising. I really like Ravagers, because I really think that, right, when I think why chaos for me, why chaos has always been in the mortal followers, the cultists, the average Joes that, right, hey, I live in the 8 points and there's literal plants that will just kill you over the turn of a century because that's how they work. They'll sit you down in this chair and then giant panes of obsidian will just slowly eat your soul, like, and I need friends to help me not have that happen to me. Or there's like leech grass that I was walking through the field one day and happened to have a bunch of grass eat me alive. Like, having friends, right? A story about chaos. And I like, to me, that's where it really resonates with chaos. If I didn't have a choice, if there was no other way to survive in this, literal hellish landscape, then of course I'm going to grab friends. And those friends are going to be people who are like-minded. And maybe I have to give up part of my soul, but you know what? I get to keep it a little longer, So for me, Ravagers are just that. They are the human enterprise of we're going to keep going and there will always be more of us. And you just have, like, they are the raiders. They are the scourge of mortals. And it just makes it feel more human in a lot of ways.
Or Eldon or Duarden
Yeah.
You guys took
More mortal.
Yeah, there you go. You guys took all the good ones, so I'll just glance over the fact that there's the Kabbalist. Yeah, so they're like the magic guys. So that's like the sorcerers and all those that dabble in the chaotic magics. There is the despoilers, which are the like the monsters and the beasts, essentially. I mean, that's where like the soul grinders end up. That's probably the worst one if you ask me. And then there's the Knights of the Empty Throne, which are essentially the Varangard one. So that's that faction. So you got your options. Take your pick. Let's talk about the special characters. However, I feel like we've dabbled on a lot of them at this point. Do we have anything to add on Archaon? I feel like we've covered him quite a bit. So any Archaon tidbits? He's super strong.
I think we covered most of them.
Cool mount. I feel like we've covered quite a bit of Be'lakor. However, there's some more questions that have come up that are pertaining to the both of them. I know we've talked at length a little bit about their rivalry, perhaps. So I'll skip on some of those, but you know what? Maybe I'll just cut right to it. Iron Pit asked. I mentioned it before. I feel like we've had evidence of both sides. Iron Pit wants to know, which side are we picking? Which side are we falling on? Who's your fave in this fight? Will, I want to know. You have to pick a side.
If I have to pick, I'm gonna go with A or B. I'm gonna take option B. I'm gonna go with the underdog, which is funny since he's the first demon prince. He actually had the first chance of rising up and was the first person to fail. Could never be ever chosen. But I just like how he's just like constantly getting up, always scheming, and he's kind of opening the doors. Now that he's allowing mortals in, and I'm, for those listening and can't see, I am a human, and I really like that I'm accepted. So I'm going to take it.
Debatable.
I thought you were fire. All right, cool. Since I want to alternate just to make it seem like it's even, Paul, which side do you fall on?
Archaon.
Yeah,
honestly, so. Like Be'lakor is super cool. I really like him, but Archaon, like, he is the only character in all of Age of Sigmar that is in complete control of his destiny. He never became a demon prince. Mm-hmm. He's still mortal. He can still be killed, and he's still wrecking face everywhere over gods, over god beasts. And he's just like, yep, I'm just a guy. I'm just that much better than you.
In control of his destiny, him and Hamilcar Bear Eater. Try and tell Hamilcar what he's going to do. Can't do it. All right, Vin, which side are you falling on? What team?
I go pretty hard for Be'lakor for sure.
Okay, excellent. Glad to hear it.
I could go into details as to why, but I think I've tamped that flag plenty today.
And to even it out, I think I'm Team Archaon. Actually, Be'lakor's cool. And what a great model! I'll tell you what. It's a strike against him is that he ended up being the red-eyed, bat-winged thing that saved Kaiser Vembrecht at Broken Realms. It should have been a vampire. Like, it so clearly should have been a vampire, especially because Soulblight were coming out any day now. Like,
because Kato.
Yeah. Well, I don't.
Ooh, that would be fun.
Sure.
Well, and also, like, Vembrecht, he specifically said his lineage was vampires. So, like, all the clues were there.
Yeah, it was I mean, they were just lying to us. It's not like it wasn't misdirection. He was lying to me. He was lying to my face. And so I'm going to hold Be'lakor personally responsible for that. So Archaon's where it's at. I want to see where he goes. So that's Iron Pit. Now you know the podcast is split down the middle. Hey, but dear listeners, please let us know what team you're on. Pick A or B and let us know in the Discord at www.theportalrealms.com/Discord. All right. So the one special character that we have not talked about, and we did a really good job avoiding talking about, is speaking of Be'lakor, is a new one. And I think it's pretty interesting. It's Eternus, Blade of the First Prince.
Mm-hmm.
First come, first serve. Who wants to talk about Eternus?
I like Be'lakor because he lifts his friends up. We'll go.
Nobody puts baby in the corner.
That was good. Yeah.
So Eternus the First Prince. We mentioned that Archaon took out his rage on some of his own Varangard, specifically the 8th Circle of Varangard. One of the dudes in attendance was a name I forget, but it doesn't matter because that's not his name anymore.
Yeah.
His new name is Eternus. He went to Be'lakor and said, like, hey, you're pretty cool. I think I might want to fight for you. But, I'm still immortal. And Be'lakor said, if you had time to die, you have time to fly. And he grabbed him, took him up into the sky. He took him. So we talked about the cursed guys and how there wasn't any change to the cursed guys themselves. Be'lakor literally breathes in the lightning geists from the cursed guys and then rips the fattest cloud over Eternus, granting him immortality. But it's immortality as long as Be'lakor chooses to reforge this guy. So now he's sort of like, even the other Varangard aren't sure if this dude is like wholeheartedly in it because he believes it, or because as soon as he stops praising Be'lakor, he may actually just die and explode. But he is a Chaos Stormcast. He dies, he explodes, he goes to the clouds, and unlike the Stormcast, he can come back in the same battle, which is another rules thing. Sorry, Aaron. And he won. One of the references to the Varen Spire is that this dude went back to the bubbler, went back to the water cooler, told all of his friends about how much Archaon sucks and how much he likes Be'lakor, and an entire circle of the Varangard have turned against Archaon and now are fighting for Be'lakor. So this dude is like the ultimate turncoat in the faction of people who are constantly backstabbing each other.
Yeah. It's impressive to me that like he's still secretive about it. Like the dude's literally like reforged, and like people are like, checks out. Like nothing suspicious about that dude. So,
do you think there's like a Stormcast alarm on the Varangard? Beep beep beep! Stormcast coming in. What's in there? I sense lightning.
What's in that? Yeah, it smells like lightning in here.
I could just see like Aryan coming to the monthly team meetings and just sees that dude in the corner with like a lightning bolt all around of him, and is like, huh, that's weird. All right.
Anyways.
So on our agenda today.
Why is my cell phone charging right now? It's not on a charger. But I appreciate that they didn't do the easy thing and be like, oh, this guy was a Stormcast, but he devoted himself to Chaos, so he's a Chaos Stormcast now, right? I like that it was more of, no, like a literal demigod took the souls of those who he had trapped and breathed it into you. Like it is the creation myth, but like writ large in AOS. And so he was Chaos. He was killed. He was born again, and he's still Chaos. It's not like, oh, I can just not be a part of Sigmar anymore. It's like, oh no, we've removed some part of Sigmar from him. Like this is actually taking something from Sigmar now.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that.
My question is, does he lose any bit of himself when he reforges? I don't see any. Is there evidence that he loses himself at all? And if not, is there something to be learned? Could Sigmar take notes? He's like, well, how's this happen, right? Like, well, how are you maintaining your identity over the course of this? Maybe more to come on that front is my guess. That's my speculation. So that'd be very cool.
Well, I think it was kind of a neat turn when it talks about how, right, in the Age of Chaos, Sigmar is up there writing down his little angry list of like, how do I beat these guys? Figures it out in the Age of Sigmar. You go through the Soul Wars era and you get into the Age of Beasts, and it only took them, even if these ages are 500 years, it took them the same amount of time to be like, I love your technology, loved what you did, hold on, hear me out, but Be'lakor does it better. And like, Bay should have won the award all the time.
He's like the definition of taking a recipe you find online, mixing it up a bit, and then winning an award over the original.
Oh, absolutely. Hey, Croak, I saw what you did there. Be cool if I try it this way? Oh, look.
Yeah, right.
The whole realm is busted. You're welcome.
Patron of the show, Dog Tired, had a question. Let's give short answers here on this one. But have the lightning I think he means Geists, with Eternus been truly corrupted as forces of chaos, or are they potentially still redeemable? Give us your prediction. Are Eternus's lightning Geists redeemable, or are they stuck with chaos forever? Paul, go.
I'm going to go with stuck with chaos forever because I don't think they're going to know how to get home anymore.
Yep, I agree. Will, what do you think? Stuck or redeemable?
Third option, if they die with him, they go to oblivion and no longer exist.
Probably true. Vint, redeemable or stuck with chaos or doomed to oblivion?
Nope, they are stuck with chaos now.
Yeah. I agree. I don't think this is the sort of special like named character where they will get too much more screen time in terms of like the core components. The character will not evolve such that like the Geists are going to be like changed in any way. They are secondary, ancillary to who the character is now at this point, is my guess.
Bonus round. I want to see Eternus fight Vanda's Hammerhand.
Oh yeah,
That needs to happen.
Sure.
Oh yeah. Chaos converted with soul power from Sigmar, and Sigmar converted with soul power from Chaos. Let's see that battle just happen. Yin and yang.
God,
What would
there's
happen?
so many,
What
there's
would
so
happen
many
if
hooks.
Eternus got hit by Gal Maraz with the Celestin Prime?
Then it might knock a single lightning Geist through, who becomes a shade of the first prince, and he's a corrupted Stormcast. But he's a good.
Perfect.
That'd be interesting.
I like
Very
it.
interesting.
There are so many hooks they got to get back to, guys. Just write faster. Write like the wind.
Just do
all right,
more.
all right. Yeah, just do more.
Just do better.
All right, guys, we had such great listener questions here that I want to touch on, but we're also running so long. So we'll keep our answers brief but I want to give full shrift, not short shrift, but full shrift to the questions that we got here. All right, so lightning round. Darth Alec asks, what do you feel about the book being more concrete on details overall, timelines, Arcane's plan, et cetera, and less mysterious and vague than before? Paul, you for or less concreteness in your battle tomes?
Totally love how much they wrapped up stuff, brought out new plot points, but there were so many things that I was like, what's going to happen to this? And we haven't heard about it in forever, and now we've heard about it.
Yeah.
Even if it was short, it was there.
Right on. Will, what do you think?
I like it.
Cool. Nice. I mean, you follow instructions. I like that. Vint, what do you think?
Very well done. 2 thumbs way up.
2 thumbs up. Likewise, I think now is the time where we start concreting stuff up. It was fine to be vague before. It had its time and place, early days in a game system, but we're hungry for that concrete. We want to munch on it. Give us more. All right, Kieran, surprise, asks, and I say that with love, by the way. It's not a sarcastic surprise. It's an appreciation surprise. They ask, I don't think we've heard much about the 8 points since Marathi's 11 elves probably took place. Oh, I bet you I'm getting some autocorrects in here. Took place there in the Broken Realms. How is Archaon recovering from the loss of the vast amounts of Varanite? And is his plan still to corrupt the Meteoric Gate and Stormazir? Yada, yada, yada. So, yeah, we haven't really touched on this conversation has not touched on the Varanite aspect or him trying to break into Azir much. I think it was mentioned before. Is there any news on that front in this book that you guys want to talk about that call out?
Book barely mentions it. Plan still moving forward.
I alluded to some other gripe I had with the book. Here's one. He had a whole bunch of Varanite that was stolen. In fact, that was a big plot point, was that she took so much Varanite out of there that it was obviously going to put a dent in his plans. The book, I think at some point even says, yeah, he lost all that Varanite, but he's still got enough, as if it mattered, as if it had made any difference whatsoever. So like, there's yet another example of this important thing happened. And they're like, yeah, but not that important. Like, but it's still going to go though. And that really bummed me out. Like, things have to have consequences. What's the point of having things? So that was lame. Other thoughts?
So I think on that note, Red Harvest touches on that. Like, she steals all the Varanite, and he's like, cultists, double time, get more. Oh, that's dangerous out there? Maybe we'll send a couple extra warbands to make sure it gets home.
I forgot.
So he sneaks it in, and he's like, oh, that's fine. I just killed people for it. So it isn't as scary.
Why didn't he do that to begin with? That should have been, if you could have done it all along. Anyways, still.
Safer sources.
Yeah, it seemed as if it was a lessened effect to what should have been a larger cause, if you ask me personally. All right, cool. We're doing good. We're at a good pace. Kieran asks, he had a couple questions just sort of relating to Archaon's connection to Slaanesh. For those eagle-eyed viewers or lookers, you would see that Durgar has 3 demonic heads, Tzeentchian head, Khorne head, and Nurgle head, but there's no Slaanesh clear head on the front. What is Archaon's connection to Slaanesh, given the Slaanesh is all locked up? It talks about it a little bit. Paul's got his hand raised. I want to see what he has to say.
He is commanding Slaanesh people, as we were talking about with Gludos and Sigvald.
True.
And also, he went and broke one of Slaanesh's chains so that he'll become indentured to him when he is eventually released. So he's thinking that he will be released.
Yeah. So he's got a lot of power. He doesn't need all the Chaos Gods all the time, and I imagine he'll be tapped into Slaanesh once he's out. He had a similar question related to the Horned Rat, but I think we joked about it earlier. It was a real answer. He's uninterested in the Horned Rat, unimportant.
Yep.
In fact, it would sully himself to get wrapped up in that whole shebang. All right, here's a good question that I think Chrisling and Kieran asked, and I might just make it a standard question for the show. So I'll tell you what, listeners, you don't got to ask anymore. I'm going to put it in the show just standard. So you've made it into the
This is the first time this has ever happened.
The annals of the Mortal Realms. It's a funny word, of this Mortal Realms story phase, is what Chrisling asked, where is the lore in the book lacking? And Kieran asked what is missing from the Battletome that you'd hope to see. Similar question, similar vein. I love it. What's missing from the book that you guys wish would have been in here? Going around the horn again, Paul. What's missing?
I don't actually see a lot missing, but I don't tend to expect everything to be in each Battletome to each Battletome. There are no maps of their Inspire. Like, that would be cool. I wouldn't mind that. But apart from that, no, I think it is more than I expected out of the Battletome, and like I'm super happy with what we were given for this one. It's probably the favorite Battletome that I have done a review for in the Mortal Realms. So
okay. Cool. Will, missing anything?
I felt like a lot of the attention was given to like God specific armies, like Korgus Cole comes up a lot, Khorne, especially in the Age of Chaos. I would have just liked more undivided stuff, even though this book technically does cover everything. Khorne has its own book. Put that over there. Let me see some other stuff. Not that there's anything specific. I just felt like every word there was less words here.
Yeah, true. I agree. Vin, was the book missing anything?
I'm right there with Will. I thought that like Korgus Cole will have his own book very soon, right? And we just went through the Zeech book where we talked about Ifrix and his fortress and Vandus' and the attempts of the Stormcast, not Vandus, to go get it. And so I feel like those words, I was looking for, those inspiring characters like, did you know about this random fort off of Random Lake in Randomville, Wisconsin, where the great Chaos Lord Randomness took hold and corrupted the populace? Or, in the Zeech book, they talked about how people were being misled by Zeechian cultists on the Cities of Sigmar trail. And it just something that way. And I feel like that would have been awesome to see here. Like, give me more characters that are a Chaos Lord, or give me more characters that are a Demon Prince, and give me something that I can really riff off for my own stories and my own narratives.
Yeah, right on. Similar vein for a lot of you guys. I don't know that the book was missing too much beyond a map of the Varen Spire, or like 8 points to some degree. I think would have been ideal. So it's almost as if it wasn't lacking. It just had weird entries, which is a lot of that Khorne stuff, which just seemed out of place and unnecessary. They needed a map, so they slapped a map in there. So in the things that I'm looking for in a Battletome, I think it checked off a lot of my checkboxes. I'll get into that into the review. So like, I don't know that too much was missing. Some Battletomes are missing things. I don't think this is one of them. So cool beans. Other thoughts?
I was just reminded, just because based on what Vin was saying, which is everything in like the stories was all things that had happened, whereas most other Battletomes have like little threads for like other people to expand on.
Yeah, true.
Like some like unnamed character did cool thing, or cool faction does cool stuff, and yeah, like Vin mentioned, like that was missing. A lot of the stories was just like a history book.
Yeah, that's a good point. Cool. Final segment before we get into our review is just Black Library examples. I think some folks were asking about that too. We've touched on a couple of them. Let's reiterate them here. Do you guys have any Black Library books that folks who are fans of Slaves to Darkness ought to read? First come, first serve.
The Warcry stuff. Woo!
Yeah. There was the Warcry anthology that was really great. All sorts of great shorts in there. And then there was also Blood of the Everchosen by Richard Strachan, which it was flagged as Warhammer Catacombs. It has nothing to do with Catacombs, but it was one of my favorite books, actually, in the Black Library stretch. So I agree. Excellent. Other Black Library suggestions?
The book I couldn't remember the name of, Scourge of Fate by Robbie McNiven. Yeah, that was the one that really goes to town about the Varangard and the Varanspire. So I thoroughly enjoyed that one.
That's great. Davey really liked that one too. If you guys want to find out more about that, we did an episode on it. I don't know what number. I bet you Klaus does, though. He'll tell you. Other Black Library stories. Because I'll say one. It's The Path to Glory by Evan Dakin. We also did an episode on that one. It is great. I'll admit I didn't see the twist coming at the end because I'm dumb, but it was pretty good. It's not Chaos God specific, so it's pretty interesting. I think there was another question that we didn't have time for talking about, like what would drive a regular person into the arms of chaos. Here's a great, it's like a novella that really talks about it, so it's pretty good. Cool. Any other ones? There's the War Queen book. I can't remember who that's by. And I guess I bet you Red Heart or Red Feast is, although corny, it's still pretty like chaos. It feels chaotic to some point too. Right. So that'll be the end of it. Let's do not the end of it, almost the end of it, in that we'll do our final feedback, our final review of the Battletome. Again, going in the same order. Paul, what did you think of this here, Slaves to Darkness Battletome?
I really enjoyed it because usually I'm picking through the Battletomes trying to find the Easter eggs, and there were so many Easter eggs, so many threads that we're putting forward. So I just love reading pretty much every page. It was great.
Yeah, very cool. Will, what'd you think?
I really loved it. I'm going to take 7 out of 8 paths of the Eightfold Path to Glory. The only points knocked is just like, I felt like there was a little bit too much attention to God-specific stuff, even though I know the faction covers all of that. They have their own book.
I forgot the number.
Yeah. How many spider legs? You
8 out of 8 spider legs. Let's go for it.
8 out of 8 spider legs. I am 12 out of 6 Raptorixes excited about this blocking awesome book.
That's not how it goes, but I like your pun. Why did you like it so much, Finn?
I really liked it for a lot of the just putting it all together and showing kind of this very meta overview of what's going on and where it's happening. Touching on Gurish Expanse and tying the giants and all the different things. It hits on the Behemoth story a bunch and shows how that affected the Slaves to Darkness in general, and touches at that they're all kind of everywhere and gives you that ubiquitous feeling that chaos is everywhere, and that it is maybe not, even though it might not be the number one threat to the mortal realms anymore, it is the most prolific, and I thought that was really neat to see.
Right, very cool. I will give it a 7 out of 8 too. Points on the Chaos Star, I guess. In that, a lot of the things I'm looking for in a Battletome, this one had. In that, if it's going to be an army that already exists, then I want to know how it lives in the new world, or what, the present day, what that looks like. I love new ranges, right? The book didn't generate the new range, but if you're going to kick out a new range with the book, all the better. So I'm excited with all the new models that are coming out. That new models means new lore. And as long as it's not awful lore, I'm happy with it. Like certain Sylvaneth entries, which are just flat out dumb. So like this one didn't have anything that bothered me. So at the very least, it gets full marks. Good, great credit. And it probably has the fact that I've never read any of the other Slaves to Darkness Battletomes. It has that going for it, in that like it didn't seem redundant or repetitive to me. Maybe if you've read every single one, maybe there's not. Maybe only the new, like the small subset of new stuff is the only new things for you. But for me, although I know the history pretty well of the Mortal Realms at this point, I still feel like it was presented in such a way that like it was unique and formatted in such a way that it was a new enough experience for me. So I didn't feel like I was retreading too much older ground. So because of that, yeah, it gets the 7 out of 8. To be an 8 out of 8, honestly, it would just have to be a brand new army entirely, and we know how often that happens. So. Yeah, I'm for it, and I recommend it. And again, thanks to GW for sending it to us. Appreciate it. Any final thoughts, my friends?
Well, usually we do 2 thumbs up, but I thought maybe we'd do 2 fists up so we could do rancor and malice.
Yeah. All right, cool.
Disappointment and whining?
Yeah.
That's the gash.
Yeah.
Oh, my bad.
And on that note, it's time for our forging. But Sigmar willing, we'll be back soon. Like, subscribe, share, or leave a review. Join us on Discord, drop a tip on our Patreon. Anything you can do will spread the word of Sigmar farther than we can on our own. Chat with us anytime about your thoughts on Twitter at The Moral Realms, if Twitter still exists. Paul, where can they find you online?
At PJ Shard.
Well, where can they find you online?
They can find me at Age of Sever.
Excellent. Vint, where can they find you online?
DOW Vint.
Excellent. And I'm Aaron. You can find me on Twitter at DoseAsos, and you can find all our Mortal Realms shows and content at www.themortalrealms.com. Dislike the show, that's all cool. Or you can go ahead and tell a friend about the Mortal Realms. Or even head over to the AOS lore Reddit and tell them how cool the Mortal Realms is, because I feel like it's not brought up nearly enough, and I really want to have a bigger presence there. I started that entire subreddit just so that people would listen to my podcast, and I feel like it's not really getting the recognition it deserves.